Good morning, everyone. If you could take a seat, we'll be ready to get started. I think I'll clear my nose one time.
Sure.
Oh, boy. I should have done that first.
That's the way it goes.
Don't want that on the camera. Everybody sat down, and it looks pretty good. Good morning and welcome. And thank you. Now that everybody's sat down, we are a pretty full room. Made a difference, Scott.
Good.
Well, welcome to our Consumer Advisory Committee. It's a bittersweet day. It's our last meeting of this chartered Consumer Advisory Committee. So welcome, everyone. I want to make a few announcements before we have our around the room introductions. So first of all, a big thank you to NCTA and to Stephanie for our breakfast and lunch this morning. So thank you very much. Yay. Welcome to Ryan Odland. Welcome, Ryan, who's here from Helen Keller National Center, and he's substituting for Dorothy Walt. I believe that Ryan heads the Deaf Blind Equipment Distribution Program in New York.
This is Ryan. Yes, that's correct. I do.
And we are going to do slower than usual introductions in honor of Ryan this morning so that the interpreters can do the type of tactile response that you're seeing right now, interpretation that you're seeing right now, and Ryan can catch everybody's name and affiliation, so we'll do that in just a moment. Before that, I want to mention a couple of changes to your printed agenda. First of all, I spoke with Admiral David Simpson, who is the Bureau Chief for the Homeland Security Bureau here at the FCC, Homeland and Public Safety Bureau, on Friday. And you may remember that he spoke to us in July about mobile security issues. And unfortunately, he's not able to be with us today. But we talked about an issue that the FCC brought up in their public meeting last week regarding multi-state 911 outage inquiry report. And he is going to have Michael Connolly come and address us from HSPSB. You know what that stands for?
Homeland Security.
Oh, that's the acronym for the it's the acronym for the Bureau. Thank you. He's going to provide a whole overview for the inquiry report for the committee, and it should be very interesting, and I'm really glad that he can join us here today. So that's great that he's going to be here. Another announcement, the Disability Working Group is going to meet during our lunch break. We have enough time today to actually split that lunch so that there will be time for the disability group to sit and eat lunch, for the interpreters to take a break, and then for the working group to then have a meeting after that. So at about 12 to 12:30, there'll be lunch break, Paul, and then your working group will meet at about 12:30. Then those of you who are attending in person today, we have something in addition we're going to be able to do. We're going to be able to provide the FCC staff feedback on a new beta version of the search engine for the FCC website. You'll learn more about this later this morning. The new search engine is not available outside of the FCC firewall, but we are being invited to give it a try during 2 time periods, during the lunchtime from 12 to 1, and then also from 2 to 2:45 this afternoon. So for anyone who has to leave early, you can do it during the lunch period, but for most of us, I think just about all of us will be here this afternoon. The better time is that 2 to 2:45 time period. And we also have, during that time period, an opportunity to go to the tech center. So we can do the tech center visit and also do this testing of the FCC website. So that should be really interesting. Finally, I think Scott has some information to share about the rechartering. Scott, I think we'll hold on that and do our intros.
Yes.
And then we'll share that information. So let's start going around the table. I will start. Deborah Berlin, CAC chairperson representing the National Consumers League. And we will hold, Chris, so we can share that information with Ryan. And just give us a nod when you're ready for the next person, and I'll make sure we move on. So we're ready to go? Great. Chris?
Good morning. My name is Chris Baker with AARP.
Ed?
Ed Bartholomew with Call for Action.
Steve Posios with the American Consumer Institute.
Julian, hold one second. Okay, go.
Julian Goldman with Partners Healthcare.
Robert Charon, Qualcomm Incorporated.
Irene Leach, Consumer Federation of America.
National Association of Broadcasters.
Julie Carney, Consumer Electronics Association.
Ryan Odlin, Helen Keller National Association. I'm here for subbing in for Dorothy Walt.
Donna Reinex with Verizon. Krista, excuse me, Krista Witanowski, CTIA, the Wireless Association.
Stephanie Pody, NCTA.
Good morning, Art Neal from New Media Rights, which is a program of California Western School of Law.
Bob Yaden with the Digital Policy Institute, here representing Barry Umansky.
Lisa Hamlin, Hearing Loss Association of America. Your mic is not on.
Your mic's not on. Nope.
Hello? There
you
we
go.
Hi, I'm Claude Stout representing the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Consumer Advocacy Network. Good morning.
Kenneth Mallory with Masuka.
Mitsuko Herrera with Montgomery County, Maryland government.
Louisa Lanchetti with T-Mobile.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Quijada from Media Literacy Project in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Hi, Paul Schrader, American Foundation for the Blind.
And I'm Scott Marshall with the FCC. Thank you, everybody. I didn't have to use shorthand to write all the names down this time around.
And so, Scott, if you want to share the recharter story with us, now is a good time.
Okay, and it's a good story, actually. For those of you who may not be aware, this committee was first chartered in November of 2000 and met in March of 2001. Our name was changed to the Consumer Advisory Committee in 2002, and we will be starting, I'm happy to report, our 8th 2-year term once our current charter has expired. That charter is currently being reviewed. It's been okayed by the chairman, of course, currently being reviewed by GSA. It needs to get filed with Congress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we will have a new committee for another 2-year term. We will be doing a public solicitation of members, as we have done frequently in the past. My goal is that we will have our first meeting in the February-March timeframe, which, by the way, is about what it usually is in an off year when we're not reappointing members or starting a new committee. Our first meeting of the calendar year usually is in that March or February or March timeframe. So my goal is to try to minimize the downtime. And you might wonder, we do, to maintain continuity of the committee's work, and we've had a lot of great work in this particular term, as you know. We do invite prior members back, and then also have some new members as well, so that we have a core of people who've been here before, and then some new members to join us for the first time. So, bottom line, stay tuned. We'll send out a public notice about the solicitation. I anticipate we will use an online application system similar to what we used previously for applications, and I hope all of you will decide to reapply, and know that we've appreciated your effort, and I know I have, and it's been a great experience for me to work with all of you this past 2 years. And I think we've got a lot of momentum going into the new committee. Later on our agenda today, we'll be talking a little bit about that in terms of advice to the next CAC, what you think might be issues that we ought to be thinking about, things we ought to be doing differently or whatever. So I think that pretty much covers it. Debbie?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. I want to see if there are any questions from anyone. Does anyone have any questions for Scott about the rechartering, as much as he can answer at this point?
You can't see your cards, you know that. I've got the lights here, so you're going to have to yell at me. Or
yeah, does anyone have any questions? Mitzi?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure to serve. In terms of reapplying, is that something that we should be looking for, or will there be an email announcement?
Oh, well, I will send the announcement out to everybody on the list. And by the way, I'm glad that you sort of asked me that question, Mitzi, because remember that although we may not be meeting as a CAC and will not be able to meet as working groups, because there won't be a CAC until the new members are appointed. The committee will be sort of in abeyance for hopefully the shortest possible time that I can make it. That does not stop any of you from talking to each other, giving us feedback about things, as you know you all do anyway, in your comments or directly to staff. And I absolutely encourage that, and hope you will continue to give us the benefit of your expertise on an individual basis, even without the CAC. I'm not going to pull the plug on the listserv or on the email discussion lists. Listserv is a trademark, by the way. I got in trouble calling it a listserv one time. Anyway, I'm not going to pull the plug on that, so you can, in terms of using it as a communications tool, but we just can't meet it in meetings and deliberate and have collective judgment as we do on our recommendations as a full CAC committee during this interim period of time. That was more than you asked me about, right? All right, Mitzi. I hope it was helpful.
Yes, it was very helpful.
Okay. Anybody else?
Anything else? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Great.
Scott.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I just also want to mention that sometimes we have very robust participation from our FCC leadership. Last time, as you will recall, we had every single commissioner here to speak to us. It was wonderful. This time, I don't know if it was the Monday or our time, but it seemed like all the commissioners are on the road. So we were unable to have any of them here this morning, but they all sent their regrets and their best wishes for a good meeting for us today. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So let's move on, and we're really pleased, however, that Mark Stone is here to talk to us about what the CGB is up to. So thank you very much, Mark Stone, for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. In looking at the cups around the table, I have an early morning urge for pita. And loving pita and hummus. That's a perfect pita, no less. Yeah. So good with pita and coffee. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Good to see all of you at this last meeting of a very productive CAC. Our bureau chief, Chris Monteith, is away, but me, Bob Aldrich, and Roger Goldblatt will be updating you on bureau activity since you last met. And Michael Karowitz, another deputy chief, will be updating you later in the day on consumer complaints. In our general consumer policy work, we continue to be busy with petitions seeking clarification of or rulemaking on the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or TCPA, which protects consumers against unwanted robocalls and text messages, amongst other things. We've received a number of recent petitions since we last talked, and I wanted to highlight one in particular that we'll be seeking a comment on soon. As is always the case, we always appreciate everyone's input within this body, and this is no exception. Specifically, the American Bankers Association has asked the Commission to clarify that messages banks send their customers to warn about data breaches and other time-sensitive matters are exempt from the TCPA's requirements as long as the messages are free to end users. We expect to seek comment on that petition very soon. As with all our TCPA work, again, we welcome your views on the types of messages consumers wish to receive and those that they find annoying. As many parties have told us, consumers may now expect certain types of messages by phones, things like appointment reminders or school announcements. As we work through our TCPA petitions, we welcome your views on those consumer expectations. So really what we're trying to do is stay faithful to the TCPA, but also recognize that the world has changed since the TCPA was passed in 1991. Consumers may expect to get a lot more on their telephone, specifically their cell phones, than they might have when that law was passed. So we certainly can use your input as we work through these issues. Just a second area that I also wanted to highlight for you that because I know that consumer billing has been a matter of CAC interest. As you may have heard, there's been a lot of interest in the issue of what's been called below-the-line fees, which are the fees consumers often see on their first bill and subsequent bills after they sign up for a communications service. Consumers report that the fees say that they cover a number of provider costs, including administrative costs, costs related to federal programs and taxes. Whatever their source, we have heard from consumers that they can be surprised by the fees and what exactly they represent. So I want you to know that the Bureau is looking into the issue of below-the-line fees and their effects on consumers. As with our other issues, we welcome your input on the fees and how well consumers understand them, both pre-purchase and on their bills. So we expect to have more information on this soon, and we welcome your thoughts. Scott also asked me, as I wrap up, to let you know again how much we appreciate all your work on the CAC this go around. And if I'm correct, I'm asking folks to come to you, Scott or Betty, during a break, or to pick up your certificates. So with that, I will turn it over to Roger to give you an update on outreach.
I'm going to be kind of short and always sweet. This month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so the 28th, which is a week from Tuesday, we're having two really different and super cool events. The morning we're going to be doing a mobile device theft. That's our new word for stolen cell phones. Mobile device theft tutorial, we're calling it. And the concept is going to be, it's kind of like a webinar, but people are allowed to come and sit in the audience. And we're going to try to script them in such a way that we're going to break them down into different segments that we're going to put out on YouTube. So there'll be a part on like situational awareness, like a police officer will say, "Don't go into Metro and hold your phone out the door," or something like that. I mean, but other things, or if you're in a restaurant, don't keep your phone on your table. Just what one would think common sense. But we're going to cover every aspect of stolen cell phones, and actually, this lady here on the right is going to be our cleanup person. Is it called cleanup person?
Cleanup.
I'm not a sports guy. Wrap up. Is it cleanup though too? No.
Clean and wrap.
Clean and wrap.
Wrap and clean.
Yeah, and so at the end she's going to just say, because it's great that we'll have all this information as we always do, but if people don't use anything that we give, so she's going to say, "This is great information, send it out. Here are the links. We're going to be getting these YouTube videos. Send them to people you know. Send them to your grandmother. Send them to your son. Send them to your uncle. Send them to your teacher for classes." And we try to think who's the most forceful person we know. So we got Debbie. We're also utilizing several of the CAC members. We're working with CTIA on this, working with Call for Action, also Consumers League. We're working with the Consumers Union, which I don't think is part of CAC. But anyway, anyone else, by the way, who thinks they might want to be part of this or has an aspect of some part of mobile device theft from beginning to end, just let me know. But it's going to be really good because we're having it scripted, and it's going to be out of the box. It's not going to be your plain old government video. It's going to be something exciting, and you can say, "Hey, I remember that. That's really a good message. I'm going to pass that on." Anyway, okay. So that's the morning. The afternoon, I'm actually going to introduce Kayla Hernandez-Ulloa from our office, who's running in this very room. We're going to have a cybersecurity showcase. Kayla, why don't you come up and talk? See, my part's easy. Kayla?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kayla Hernandez-Ulloa. Some of you I've met before. It's a pleasure for me to be here this morning with you to share just a summary of what Roger just mentioned, our cybersecurity awareness showcase. So we decided to, as Roger was saying, divide the day into two. The first part will be the tutorial that he mentioned before, and the second will be the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month Technology Expo. In summary, this will be an interactive showcase where consumers can come in. They've been invited to look at different aspects of cybersecurity, whether it's personal, whether it's protecting their networks. one of the things that we thought about was, because this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, how can it be of interest to consumers? Because everyone here in the room is very aware of cybersecurity and how to protect ourselves. But sometimes consumers forget. So the whole idea was bring in some of our partners so that they can showcase to consumers things that they might forget, such as setting strong passwords, not sharing your passwords with others. Like Roger said, not leaving your devices out in the open because they can easily get stolen and your information and can be misused. So we have already sent out the first press release. We're sending out very soon a second press release that is listing all the exhibitors. We invite you all to come. This event, again, is October 28th here in the Commission meeting room from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And we'd like you to also share this with your contacts and your networks, because we feel that this is really important, not only for consumers, the general public, but also for everyone here to remind all their constituencies. Thank you.
The date?
Oh, sure. It's Tuesday, October 28th, and this second portion will be from 1 in the afternoon to 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in the Commission meeting room.
Yeah, come on. Or you can go over there.
Okay. Okay, and then on October 29th, from 11 to 1 p.m., if you happen to see a lot of action outside the Commission building, what we call the horseshoe outside, it's because we're working with the Wireless Foundation on a connected car event. We're having 3 or 4 wireless connected cars to be demoed. So anyone who's around and wants to come see, it's fascinating. It's kind of the future, but it's also a lot of what is today on what these cars can do. Everything from mobile health to almost driving.
When is that?
That's the 29th, the day after our cybersecurity event. I believe that's a Wednesday, 11 to 1. Free cookies. But the cars will be very cool. I mean, it's going to be very, very exciting. So you're all invited. And on behalf of the Outreach Division, it's been a pleasure working with all of you, and we hope to see you again.
Yep, stay. Please.
Yes, I should. Yeah.
Is there any other information, or can we do Q&A?
So, Bob Aldrich.
Oh, Bob is coming.
Yes, but I'm not sure he's here at the moment.
Okay, so maybe we'll just start with some. Does anyone have any questions for Roger or Mark? Okay, as we always do, put your cards up. I saw Lisa and Julian, you want to just put your card up so we can keep track, and then Mitzi. Lisa?
Good morning. Yeah. Thank you for coming in. And I have a question for Mark. When you were talking about the below the line fees?
Yeah.
Right. Did that include things like relay funds and so disclosing? And how did that all come about, that you wanted to start looking at that? Was there a petition made?
It's an issue, I think, that's been floating around for a while. There has been consumers that have filed complaints and asked us about it. There's also been some attention paid to it in the press. So it's not a new issue, I don't think, but one that seems to have gathered increasing interest. And it could include, I'm not sure the Commission has ever defined the term, but certainly it could include a host of different types of charges, administrative, things possibly related to federal or state programs, or just the collection of taxes.
So just to make sure I'm clear, so it may or may not include the Telecommunications Relay Services Fund?
Right.
Okay, so we'd have to be careful about how that's all explained and...
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Julian?
Yes, thank you. Coincidentally, I think this is a question for Mark, I believe. Coincidentally, this week, tomorrow and the next day, the FDA is holding a cybersecurity workshop for medical devices. And these days, we can't ignore the importance of the connectivity and the transfer of data from portable and personal medical devices, such as glucometers and the like, through mobile devices, the things that used to be called cell phones. And and that data moving on its way to the cloud, to an interim storage area, perhaps for use by a clinical provider or to a hospital or to a family member. And I'm wondering how we're thinking about this holistically across. And I know there's been a very good relationship between agencies, between the FCC and the FDA, for example. That this seems like a particularly ripe area for the attention. Cybersecurity being an important and hot topic, and and the upcoming and the events this week, for example, and the upcoming events later October. So, I don't have a question as much as it's a general question about what can we do to really leverage the opportunities to ensure that the data is secure and protected.
I wish we had somebody from our new Connect to Health Task Force here. I wish we had somebody here from our new Connect to Health Task Force, and I will actually talk to them this afternoon and get back to you on this, because I think that's a really good point. And make sure they're aware, because they work with FDA like every day.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, sure.
And just another comment on that, Julian, you may remember that we did have representatives of that task force talk to the disability and health working groups last meeting. So there is a connection there, and hopefully it will flourish. And Roger, if you could check for the latest, that would be great.
Will do.
I don't know if it's helpful at all, but I will be participating. Bless you. I will be participating in the FDA workshop tomorrow, and I don't know if I'm still a CAC member tomorrow. I think I am. I'm not sure.
23rd. We just got the word.
Oh,
the 23rd.
So I don't turn into a pumpkin till the 23rd. Okay.
Midnight.
Okay, midnight. So perhaps there's an opportunity to carry a message there about the interest here as well. Okay, thank you.
Good. Mitzi.
Thank you. Mitzi Hura from Montgomery County, Maryland. We take consumer complaints and we report that data. We have had several discussions within this CAC incarnation about the reporting of the FCC data on consumer complaints. We have had Commissioner Wozenwurzel come down. We've had several people talk to us from your bureau about the importance that the new chair has placed on that. And in the previous CAC, and I believe in the one before that, there was a discussion and a request that the bureau put forward reports that included all of the complaints that have been received. There was a lot of discussion in here about, particularly from some of the carriers, about how to correct some of that, because sometimes the complaints are alleged against the carriers when it's really somebody who's just using that service. What I'm looking on the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, I now see that there is no reports or there seems to be no link to the reports. In looking at the past releases I took the last 8 different tabs in there. There is no report in there. And in doing a search, there's information that comes up about how to file accessibility complaints, but those reports aren't coming up. Can you tell us what is the time frame for the Bureau to be releasing all of the complaints that they are receiving, numerically categorized, not just the top 5 in each quarter? Are those quarterly reports still being issued? And what's the status on the improvements that were going to be made on a sort of open government platform that Commissioner Pai had talked about?
So you're going to get an update at 10:40 from our folks that are managing the consumer complaints effort. to revamp, and I'm certain they will be able to address your questions on reporting and timelines. Normally, those folks would have been here as part of this part of the program, but we didn't want to be redundant with what's happening at 1040.
Thank you.
But I can tell you that we've been doing what we call usability tests on the new complaint pages, and really trying to get as much input as possible from consumers, people on the outside. When this does become public, we want to make sure it's as consumer friendly and meets all those needs. So I've been on the back end making sure that we have people testing it. So Michael should be able to give you the deadlines. I have no idea.
Does anyone else have any questions for the CGB team? Okay. So is Bob?
I don't think Bob is here, but perhaps
He can join us at some point.
5 or 10 minute update when he's here.
Okay. Great. Thank you both very much. We look forward to the programs you've got, Roger. Sounds
Roger,
good.
thank you. Sure.
And Mark, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Is Mary Ellen here?
Sorry, Taylor.
Oh my goodness, we're early.
How about that?
How did that happen? Well, we didn't have Bob. Bob wasn't here. Okay.
Should we have a little advice to the next cat for a few minutes?
When were we planning on moving that?
That would be 11 to 11:30, but we've got
We don't have that on
another
yet.
speaker.
Yeah, it just seems to do that for 10 minutes. Why don't we take a very brief coffee break, meaning less than, like a 5-minute coffee break,
Right.
and then back in our seats.
You can get one of the perfect pita cups for a souvenir.
Perfect pita coffee break, yes, let's do that. Thank you all, and then we'll be back in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. It was a nice coffee break. And good morning to you all. I am so pleased and excited to hear about the work that our next presenters have done and what they found out. These folks have been looking at the FCC's website and improvements to it. I just like the topic here, progress toward a better FCC web experience. And I know that that's something near and dear to our heart. As the CAC, we've been talking about the website for years, looking at it for years, and thinking about ways that consumers, both consumer organizations and everyday consumers, could better utilize the FCC's website. So we're very pleased and excited that the FCC has undertaken this effort to do just that. So I'm pleased to welcome Mary Ellen Seal, Executive Director for Modernization, Office of the Managing Director of the FCC, and Spencer Gerald, founder and CEO of Spark Experience. And I know a few of us were involved in actually doing some review of the website and providing feedback. I don't know how many of us actually did that, but I know a few of us did. Got an email from something called Spark, and I think it was maybe a little confusing, but some of us did respond, if not the first time, maybe the second time, and provided some feedback. So thank you, Spark and FCC, for undertaking this, and welcome. Mary Ellen, are you starting us off?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Let's see. Can you hear me? Good morning. My name is Mary Ellen Seal, as Deborah introduced me, and thank you, Deborah, for those introductory remarks. As she mentioned, I am in charge of modernization of the FCC IT enterprise. And it covers lots of different things, not only the website, but how we look at data and how we modernize the IT infrastructure that exists here to better serve both our employees, our constituents, and our customers. So with that, my boss is Dr. David Bray. He's the CIO. He's in Harvard the next 2 weeks. But as he came in, he's been at the FCC for about a year. And upon his arrival, he's charted a series of dialogues and conversation throughout the FCC with the chairman, the managing director of the bureaus and offices, to really understand what we inherited and what we needed to modernize and understand the legacy IT infrastructure going forward. So after he had these discussions, he identified a number of areas, including the website, for us to tackle. The first thing that he did was go on a significant recruiting campaign because our organization had been basically downsized to the point of very little government staff, mostly contractors, but a very, very, very lean and overtaxed IT enterprise, both in terms of people and systems. He uncovered over 200 systems that needed to be modernized in varying states of repair. Some of those IT systems dated back to the early 1990s. And if you've been tracking the news at all, you might have heard some things called net neutrality. And net neutrality happens to be dependent upon the ECFS, electronic comment filing system, that is at the heart of what we do at the FCC. And unfortunately, it was built in the 1990s and has been struggling to keep up with the onslaught of feedback we've been getting from the private sector. Unfortunately, we are in the throes of not only modernizing lots of other systems within the IT infrastructure. That's just an example of some of the things we tackled. The things that I have been looking at, I've been on board for about 4 months, and I immediately set on the task of looking at the resiliency and security of the IT infrastructure. Did several audits, both in terms of people, process, and technology in the FCC, and learned that not only are the systems antiquated, but they weren't built with security intrinsically woven into everything that's built for and sustained for the FCC. So we're starting a lot of different activities related to the modernization effort, and I'll talk to that in a minute. Under the website project, we started, about 6 months ago, a little bit before I came on board, and we had a web working group where we had representatives across the FCC that had been in place for some time, but they had never really gotten the mandate to really take charge of the website and modernize it. So the responsibility came to the CIO's office to take the charge. We contracted with FCC and ISS to bring in leading experts to look at the website to improve the things that we had heard from our constituents, specifically search, functionality, and navigation. So, what we heard from both our customers and constituents as well as employees is that they really liked the old website. It was easier to find things, and it was laid out a lot better. So a lot of people were inside the organization were posting data to the old website because it was easier to use, and from the constituents, that's what they wanted to use because they found things there. So that left us with a huge challenge as to how we need to organize the data and how we need to prepare the information so that Spencer, as you'll hear from him in a few minutes, can actually start the work of modernizing the website. We looked at, I think there was over 2,000 pages, subpages of content. I think it's closer to 4,000 now. We also needed to look at our taxonomy, how the information, what are the key terms and categories of way information is organized. So there wasn't any taxonomy, there wasn't any information architecture to the old website, there wasn't a good understanding of how the pages were organized and some kind of layout, a logical layout, so we just have spreadsheets and spreadsheets. So it's going through massive amounts of data to try to figure out what is the best way to organize it. And I'll let Spencer, who's the expert, of course, all of you, maybe some of you were involved in some of our analysis of the content, but we'll talk about the specifics of that in a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about, not too much of time, but a little bit about the efforts we have underway under modernization. We have 3 phases that we've identified under the modernization program. The first phase is called stabilization. One of the things that we determined early on was that the IT infrastructure, as I mentioned with ECFS, is not stable enough to handle the internet traffic of today's environment, as well as it wasn't built with security. So the first thing we're doing is moving most of the IT infrastructure that exists in this building to an off-site data center so that we can have full replication at Gettysburg to improve the security and resiliency, but also start the process of modernizing the data holdings so that we can prepare to move the data holdings to the cloud and provision the data so that it is accessible in a broader array. So the first step is moving a lot of the IT, the hardware, out of this building into a modernized data center. And then the next step would slowly migrate the applications to a more modernized format. And as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the structure of the data as well. I know you're really interested more on the website, so I'll move back to that. The website project also had 4 main goals, and I'll talk to that and then turn it over to Spencer. The first goal, or the first phase, was audience research. Who are the audience? How do we prepare the data so that it resonates with the audience? So we did a lot of work on the audience, and we found out, it's no brainer to you guys, consumers and practitioners. And so, the first thing in terms of any communication effort is really focusing on the audience. So we needed to understand our audience and understand who they are and what they're interested in. So we did a lot of work on the audience, and you were involved in some of the audience analysis that we did. The other effort was the content research. I mentioned the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pages. It keeps growing. It's like these little mushrooms that keep growing. More pages and more pages. And so we started an effort to look at the content. And what are the resonant themes that it came out from the content? And so I think Spencer's team identified 150 different key terms that resonates throughout the website. So we had a number of exercises where we engage folks here as well as the FCC to organize that content, organize those key themes into logical, intuitive kinds of ways to inform us in terms of the information architecture. So we did that. We are also now in the phase of prototyping and usability testing, and we're a number of efforts underway with that. We do have a prototype website that the core team is looking at right now, but it's still a long way from being there. And the last part, the last thing, not really the last thing, I have one other thing, but we've been working with Key Designer improving the search capabilities. We have built an engine behind the search. We had, as I mentioned, a lot of concern about being able to search the website for key information. So we've inquired and found the leading researcher and engineer that supported Google Analytics. And that person has been working with us for about 4 months to improve the search experience. And in fact, I think today we have a breakout session where folks can actually test the search capability and see that we are definitely improving the way that you find information. And our goal is to get close to, as possible, a result in terms of the search. If you search the information on the website, it'd be as close as searching those same key terms on Google. And we're getting very close to the same metrics. And the last thing I wanted to say before I turn it over to Spencer is within the FCC, we've started an effort to maintain the content. We've been working with the bureaus and offices to do content certification. We've released a content certification policy, and every bureau and office is going to certify their content is relevant and up to date every year. We've rolled that out. We've rolled out the pages that we believe, all those thousands of pages, in spreadsheets to the bureaus and offices and say, do you own these pages? And if so, let us know you do own them and that you are going to update them by some periodicity. And eventually we hope to organize the content in such a way that it's easy to read and discover the content. So we have that going on as well. So we've got some homework inside the FCC to make that content accessible. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this phase of the website project, we went and talked to industry to find who are really the leaders in this space in terms of website design. And Spencer's organization, his company, Spark Experience, has actually been a leading innovator in this space. He utilizes psychology and the science of intuition and analysis to drive the design of the website. One of the things that we found early on is that a lot of websites are done by committee, and committee consensus sometimes ends up with not a very well-designed website. So we wanted to use psychology as well as science behind the way the brain organizes content to make sure that it resonates with folks. So about last summer, beginning of the summer, we hired Spencer, and his team has been working with us every week, working through the project. As I mentioned, Spencer Gerald is the founder and CEO of Spark Experience and is here today to share us about the progress we've made and talk to you a little bit about, in more detail, the audience and content research. Spencer.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mary Ellen, and also Deborah and everyone here for welcoming me into the CAC committee meeting. I'm thrilled to provide an update today. My goal is to let everyone know what work we've done so far, the results of that work. I'll share some of the data with you that we've collected along the way so that you can have an update as to where we are now. And I'd like to also share with you some of the information about what we're doing next. First, however, I would really like to thank everybody sitting around this table and those also watching online. We had quite a bit of participation in the research to date and in interviewing, speaking with, and testing some of the new concepts and organization of the website with some of the folks sitting right here around this table, and we really thank you for your input. This whole project really hinges on speaking with real people with real tasks that you have to do on the website. And that's been such an important thing. For those who have not participated yet, not to worry at all. The research is a continuous iterative process throughout the entire course of the design project, and there will be multiple other opportunities to participate in working with us, speaking with us as we continue to conduct research and work on the design. So with that, thank you so much, and I'd love to provide an update on some of the things that we learned. First off, as Mary Ellen said, we started out by doing audience research. And Mary Ellen also made a very important point that I'd like to drive home, that most of the time when we look at how website design is done, or any kind of design for that matter, it often can seem subjective, and it can often seem very much driven by opinions. And this is the sort of design by committee approach that Mary Ellen referred to. And when we take that approach, we end up compromising. We end up looking at that information and trying to fit everything possible on the homepage to accommodate every opinion possible. And when you do that, nothing is easy to find. And so the main point that we want to make sure that everyone remembers, as Mary Ellen already stated, is that this process is very much a research-driven approach. It's a process of continually collecting feedback and information as we move forward with the design. Every step we take, we research it, make sure that we're following the right path, and then we make some modifications and changes. And then we research it, and that cycle continues on and on. Until we really have great confidence that we are producing the right materials. In the beginning, the audience research had a lot to do with understanding the various different types of users and user groups that come to the FCC website. What is the context of how they're using the information? And what information are they looking for, and how do they expect to find it? That is an incredibly broad range for the FCC. It's lawyers of very many different kinds of capacities, and engineers, and consumers, and consumer advisory groups. It's you folks around this table, as well as many thousands and tens of thousands of others. And so the first challenge is to understand who these folks are, to really internalize that information, and then to use that information as we look towards designing the website with those people in mind, yourselves included. And so we created a set of personas. Personas you can imagine imagine are pictures, representations of the target audiences of very different kinds. We literally take a photo of a person, we put a name on it, and we provide a lot of information about where they're coming from and what they're trying to do. And we keep these on our desks every day of this entire process, so that as we go along, we always know, but will this work for Joe and will this work for Sally? And that is a very important part of our process, to always keep the user in mind. And as I said, one of the other important ways of keeping the user in mind is not just keeping those pictures nearby with the data that we collected and that information, but continually reaching out and speaking with the individuals that are coming to use the website. We also conducted usability testing, whereby we brought people in to watch them, to observe them, try to do the types of tasks that they come to the FCC website to do. Some of you participated in that as well. And so to skip some of the details of the science behind how that method is done, essentially people come in and they have certain things that they want to accomplish on the website, and we watch how they try to do it. One of the things that we learned was using the website, probably not to your surprise, in order to accomplish the tasks that they come to do, was not very easy. And instead, people found a lot of shortcuts and workarounds, including bookmarking the pages that they, at some point along the way, found. And as Mary Ellen referred to, sometimes relying on the old site, the very old site, because there were certain aspects of that were, to some degree, easier to use. And we need to understand and study why. So as we watched the usability testing, we watched people coming in and trying to do what they do every day in their lives, and we got to internalize that knowledge and understand what that experience is like. Where do people struggle, and how can we look at some of the weaknesses as well as some of the things that are working, because it's not all bad. There are some things that are working, and how can we make sure to leverage that information towards the next part of the design. As you've probably expected, one of the key areas of weakness in the design, and as Mary Ellen spoke about, is the way that information is organized. So if you come to a website and you want to find a particular piece of information or accomplish a particular task, the first thing you have to do is find where to go. And you've all experienced in websites that can be across the World Wide Web sometimes a difficult task, and the same was true for FCC. And so what we did was we followed a few methodologies in order to refine, as Mary Ellen said, the information architecture, or the way that information is organized throughout the site so that you can more intuitively and more easily come and find what you're looking for. Many of you participated in a method we call a card sort. A card sort is where we gathered a lot of the information that is provided on the FCC website, and individuals, one person at a time, took that information and sorted it into groups that make sense to them. And then after sorting it into those categories and saying, well, I think that these things belong together and those things belong together, giving it a name and saying, this is what I expect that unit to be called. So we also understand the language. We analyzed that data, and we took a statistical approach to understanding how across all these different user groups do people tend to organize information so that we can make it much easier. And I'd love to share with you the data of where we are in that process right now. So in testing the current site information architecture, the current way things are organized, we ask people, come and find a particular piece of information. We measure how successful they are at finding it within that site structure. The current site performed at 27% of people be able to access the information that they're looking for by navigating to it. 27%, I see some shaking heads. It's not where we need to be. Usability standards say that we should be shooting for 80%, and that can be very difficult when there's a site that has so much complexity. Mary Ellen spoke about 2,000 and 4,000 pages, and there's even 50,000 depending on how you count. So it's a lot of information to organize and a lot of different people and perspectives, and that's a very difficult challenge. We took the card sort information, the ways that you all taught us that information could be more logically organized, and we reorganized according to that information. We tested it again. We went a very big jump from 27%, actually just think of it like this, reverse the numbers, to 72%. So we had a wonderful jump, and the incredible team that is working with us said, well, Spencer, that's not good enough. You told us that 80% is where we needed to be. And they were right, and they should have said that to us, and so that's exactly what we did. We went back to the drawing board and we said, based on this latest round of data, what can we do to further improve? And so we did that, and then we went out and tested again. And many of you participated in that round of research. And we're now at 88% in the success of people using the information architecture to find those key tasks. So we've jumped from 27% to 72% based in the research, further looking at the research in 88%. Now, I don't want that to be something that we all say, well, that's great, we're done, we should all go home, because that's just one piece. One piece is creating an organization for the site, a map for the information that makes things easier to find. Now we're going into the next level of that, and we're looking at how things are visually presented, how we can make things easier to consume. And we're making great progress in that, and the next time that we visit together, I hope to provide you some visuals and give you an update as to the next stage of the research and design process. Well, thank you all very much for listening, and I'm sure we'll have a chance for questions.
So I have a question. I don't think I participated in that process of usability. I did, I think, give very initial feedback. So when you test that usability, is it someone who's looking at the website for the first time or a seasoned user? Because I know that, it's very different the first 10 times you use it versus the 100th time you get on that website. So what are you testing for usability?
What a fantastic question. The important thing is to do what's natural and to test various different user groups with different perspectives. And so most of the people that use fcc.gov are actually quite frequent users, and they're there very often, some visiting it a dozen times a day, as we learned and captured in the personas that I spoke about. And so we certainly needed to test them. And those folks have a lot of shortcuts, ways that they get to the information that is not because the website helped them get there, but because they found it once, bookmarked it, or some other shortcut that they've established. Other people, to your point, Deborah, are much less frequent users, particularly in the consumer category, and have a very different level of experience, and we need to account for that as well. So we interviewed and did usability testing in CardSort with both categories of people, including those that are very frequent users, those that are moderately frequent, they use it from time to time, and those that do have a need, they do have a realistic, real-life need to come here. We're not testing it with folks that just would say, well, I don't know why I'd even be at this website. What is the FCC? But we certainly tested with people that have a much less frequent and much newer need to be on the site.
And you still got that sort of high usability?
It was actually quite different. So those that use the site very frequently tended to have ways to get to the information that they wanted, regardless of the website. And those that don't use it frequently had no idea how to do so. The goal of the research that we've done is to make it work in either case. So categorize it into logical sets of information where people can more intuitively find what they're looking for. And so the results that I've reported on the 27 to 72 to 88 those are the results of both categories, and both were really able to successfully find what they were looking for within that structure.
Okay, I'm sorry because I was faced that way. I didn't see who went up first, but I see Paul, Louisa, Mitzi, Claude.
Excellent.
Paul?
Sure.
Thanks. Paul Schrader, American Foundation for the Blind. Might be for both of you, I'm not sure, but I understand from some colleagues who did do some testing that accessibility was a problem for people with vision loss, to be sure, maybe other people with disabilities as well. So, Spencer, maybe you can talk a little bit about Spark's experience in addressing accessibility as part of the usability on the persona for building websites, and also the extent to which, or what you're using, I guess, as the accessibility guidelines. There are, of course, very well-established web guidelines, some of which have not been updated in a while for the federal sector under Section 508, but I would remind you that Section 508 guidelines are guidelines. There's a better set of standards out there, and obviously the expectation is that federal agencies will live up to the best of those standards, best practices.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the question, Paul. When we look at accessibility and designing for folks with disabilities, we like to take two perspectives on it. One is, what are the standards, as you said, 508 compliance and even exceeding those standards that we need to meet? And there are coding standards of how sites should be coded in order to make sure that information is easily accessible with screen readers for people with low vision and other disabilities that we need to be accounting for. And that teaches us quite a bit. It helps us really make sure that we are meeting those minimum standards. In addition to that, however, the research that I'm speaking of, where we really sit with people and we watch their interactions, is in many cases far more enlightening. And that's a task that we have done alongside and as a part of the research that we've been conducting along the way. So the usability testing, we've been doing it with folks using screen readers, people with low vision, as in an effort to understand that interaction in the context of all of the interactions that are important to the FCC website. It's quite enlightening. It's really wonderful to see. And for those who have not sat with a colleague and watched how they navigate the site when they're using a screen reader, it's incredibly fascinating, and you'll find that it really opens your eyes and your mindset towards how do we design better for those cases. We will continue to do research. In fact, our prototype that we'll be in the process of developing as the next couple months move forward will be a fully accessible 508 compliant website, essentially, although it's for us just a testing mechanism. And one of the things that we'll be testing, both from a standards perspective using automated testing, but also from a usability testing perspective, we'll be putting it in front of people who have that need and making sure that it's meeting those criteria.
Could I just do a quick follow-up then to Mary Ellen? The documents that are made available by the FCC, are you also looking at ensuring that those documents are accessible? Because generally speaking, the Commission's documents are iffy at best in terms of accessibility.
Paul, thank you for that. And also Spencer. A couple of things. Absolutely, we're looking at all of the content will be migrated over into the correct format so that they are accessible, and understand clearly that some of the, PDF documents, some of the screen readers are not that well versed or able to use those. One of the things I wanted to add to what we've been doing is, as we were going through, clearly the website will be 508 compliant, and we're ensuring that the website will be responsive in design so that folks can read it or use it on any kind of device. But one of the things that we started and Scott was first participant of this activity, was we put together a disability working group or accessibility working group inside the FCC to really understand the challenges, because we found out that there's a number of accessibility tools out there that are good for one task and not good for other tasks. We also found out that some of the videos that are posted on the website, if they're not run through YouTube, they don't have the reader on the bottom that translates the verbal into a text format. So we are continuing to engage our partners to help us better design the website in that regard. And then the last part I'd talk a little bit about is the usability testing. Clearly, going down this project, we had the intent to engage and ensure that everything that we publish on the website is compliant and accessible. But the testing, not so much. So one of the things that we learned is that going forward with the card sort, as an example, it's very difficult to translate that exercise or that experiment, if you will, to a person who's blind to be able to sort that data. We were given over 150 cards to sort, all random cards with text that it was hard to sort even if you were a visual person. So we stepped back and said, how would be the best way to organize this content so that the visually impaired could actually participate in a way that was meaningful? And so we learned from that going forward. Some of, again, the experiments that we're doing, we have to convert them in a way that we can engage our entire audience base. Hopefully that answers some of your questions, Paul. You're welcome.
Thanks. Louisa.
I just have a couple of quick comments and a question, and that is, first of all, this is very exciting work. Kudos to you, and I think, as you can tell, everyone here who does interact with the website, you know, they were very pleased to see these changes. Are you quite far along as far as up to the 80% as far as putting in place the changes that you plan, and in turn, do you have the resources for that, number one? And number two, just as a matter of curiosity, as a frequent visitor to the former website, notwithstanding the transition.gov and changes, did the usability index, was it higher for the old site than the new one pre-year changes? Because it was pretty bad before you all came. But the main question is, do you have the resources to make, in fact, these changes, and how far are you in the implementation piece of this?
Thank you for that question. I should have done a better job of explaining the entire end-to-end project. So what we just described today is the prototype.
Okay.
And the prototype is going to be delivered around Christmas time.
Great.
From there, we're going to roll it into full production. Yes, we do have the resources. We've dedicated and set aside for the next phase. And the next phase, it'll be a fully functioning website. So what we're going to get in December is, as I mentioned, a prototype. It'll have the look and feel as well as some content on some of the landing pages. Working with the bureaus and offices, we'll start to migrate that content over the next couple of months, but it won't be fully migrated until the full website is fully, coming out of production. As part of the production effort, we have to ensure that the various applications that depend on the website, that they are smoothly integrated. We have to do full security testing on the website. And migrate it from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7. So we're in the migration stages of that. So there's a lot of activities going to be going on in the next phase, and we hope to have the new site fully functioning around the June-July timeframe of next year. The next phase is about the same cost, we think, as what we've paid so far. So it's really cost effective. I feel like we've done a really good job in saving the taxpayers money in terms of this website design going forward. Hopefully that answered most of it.
Thank you very much.
And the other question there was about what's now known as transition,
Transition.
the previous version of the site,
yeah.
and whether or not that performed better than today's version. Certainly the satisfaction of what people feel and report about that site is better, because when it launched, it actually followed more of a similar process to what we're doing today, a more of a user-centered design process, which for a site of this magnitude is really the only way to go. The current site didn't follow that process in the same way. That said, testing the data, understanding how that older site, how transition would operate today versus the current site, neither is really performing that well. We can't expect in a world of modern technology to rest on the laurels of something that has grown more stale over time.
Very good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments.
Louisa captured the majority of what I was looking for. I guess drilling down on that a little bit, within the bureaus and offices, are there additional resources being provided to them to transition all of these materials and to update? And could you briefly weigh in on, did you find any distinctions between, I guess intuitively, or what people were looking for, between consumers and what I'll just say are the attorneys for carriers, local governments, and so forth?
Okay, I'll do the resources. So, yes, you're right. Each bureau and office is responsible for maintaining their subpage, and we've been working with them to identify the pages that they feel they're responsible for. Most of the bureaus and offices have a webmaster on site. We've reinvigorated the web working group that has the main website master for the FCC leading that, and we have representation from all the bureaus and offices. Now, what we have heard is that they are at varying degrees of skill competency, and they sometimes do this as another duty as assigned. So one of the things we've heard loud and clear is they need help. And so we're, by bringing the web working group together on a monthly basis as well, leveraging the resources of the entire team. We're hoping to use that as well as provide through a more blanket contract through the IT CIO's office access to webmasters. But yes, you're right. Some of the boroughs and offices don't have the full-time resources to devote to it. And then lastly, one of the things that Spark had recommended to us is migrating the content. It's not just like a lift up the file and repost it. It's got to be rewritten and reorganized so it's easy to find, and it's not just a constant text that's hard to go through. So that'll be a longer period, but at least we want to organize the content and move it over and do some rewriting and then work with the bureaus and offices to put it into a more modernized format in terms of blogs and bullets and key sections and really thinking about how the data is organized on their page.
Great. And to your other question about the differences between consumers and practitioners in finding information, as you might expect, the differences are vast. The mindset that a consumer approaches the website with and the tasks that they're trying to do are entirely different than how a practitioner, a lawyer, an engineer might approach the website. Because of that, one of the things that we've recommended and are working on building into the design is actually segregating the consumer-oriented content into its own area. And I can see a lot of nodding heads. Probably you're thinking, I told you to do that years ago. And we absolutely agree. It's an important thing to do. It makes a lot of sense. It's an entirely different set of tasks and a different mindset and familiarity. One of the things that on the practitioner side we found incredibly fascinating was just about every day of the week I recommend to organizations, don't organize the content into categories that make sense to you internally. Think about it from an outside perspective. And that held true for consumers absolutely through and through. Interestingly, on the FCC.gov website, the Bureau and Office organization of content, for those that are more familiar and real practitioners who are involved in the content on a day-to-day basis, actually is, in many cases, how they expect to find information, believe it or not. So that internal organizational mindset, as much as it makes me cringe to say so, is not that different in certain areas for certain people or cases as on the outside. So we have to account for both. And the navigation that we've built allows for you to look at the information from a topical perspective, from a more organizational bureau and office perspective, and also segregating consumer information out into a place that's easily accessible for those that are less frequent visitors. Excellent question.
So can I just briefly add on just to say that as you have new materials, new reports, and new things come out, one of the things that would be useful is to ensure that how it's going to appear on the website, where it's organized, and those things, that's part of the process of all new things that come along, and that in the future CACs, that having something where you have that web team come and talk to people and to give feedback on a regular basis can be useful.
Excellent.
Excellent. Claude, you're next. And then Fernando, and then I'm sorry, Ryan has a question, right? Ryan and then Fernando.
Hi, this is Claude. I really want to make two comments, one directed to each of you. First of all, I really want to commend you with the plans that you have to modernize the website. I've been working for telecommunications for the deaf and hard of hearing for almost 18 years, and I'm a frequent user of the FCC website, I would say on a daily basis. And I think that the number one achievement that could be made with the FCC website is to revamp that search engine. So I'm so pleased to hear you say that you are going to model it after Google Analytics. I think that's critical. Every day, well, let me just say I'm getting into my later years. I'm 60 years old. I can't remember the docket numbers like I used to be able to. So just locating certain findings is very difficult. So I would make note for the dockets that I needed for my particular organization rather than having to search for the docket numbers. That would be fantastic. So if there was some way for me to get the information specific to my organization, sometimes it takes me 15 minutes, 30 minutes before I get to the correct docket number because I don't have it. The other thing is I often know the date or the approximate date of filing. So if your search engine could allow me with my agency name to do an initial search and then to narrow it down from there, I wouldn't have to go back and locate the docket number. I could narrow it down by time range or by date range. So the search engine functionality, that making that process easier for us, I think is critical for us frequent users. And please, the other comment I have is please take full advantage of the captioning that you have on the videos that are available on your website. Captioning is not only an accessibility tool, but it's a way for you to get information fed into your database. So if someone, for example, wants to know more about net neutrality, they wouldn't necessarily only look at the filings that were made, but they could look through all of those videos. They become searchable because that text is available from the captioning. So it's not only beneficial to members of the deaf and hard of hearing community, but it actually can really be a perk for everyone. So thank you again for the efforts that you've made and for your ongoing work on the website. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Claude.
Thank you, and excellent comments.
Thank you, Claude.
Sure. Hi, my name is Deanna Stevens. I work on Mary Ellen's team on improving the website. Claude, I just wanted to commend you for your remarks. And we actually have our search expert over there, Ram, raise your hand. He's awesome. I just want to take this opportunity to reemphasize that we do have a new search application that is in demo/beta mode. We have 2 laptops, one with JAWS loaded on it, and we are interested in having folks around the table test the search application, which has the capability to help you discover docket numbers. You can search by docket number if you know it, but it'll also have the capability to help you discover what a docket number is if you don't know what it is. So please, at 12 to 1, we'll be in there taking comments and allowing people to test the search, and from 2 to 3. And it's in TW.
We'll make that announcement later, and we've already told folks about that, and we'll make that announcement again.
Thanks, Diana. Appreciate it.
Can you tell us how many people can you accommodate at one time? Today from 12 to 1 and 2 to 3?
2 at a time. 2 or 3 people.
And how much time will they need? 10 minutes?
5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, that'll help us with our planning, but that'll be great.
Yeah,
I think
great.
that'll be very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ryan? I think your mic will be on. Give it a try.
So this is Ryan from Helen Keller National Center. Related to accessibility and the search engine, as both Paul and Claude previously commented, I'm certainly looking for things related to accessibility and making sure that information is accessible to deafblind people as well. Sometimes screen readers who use voice, sometimes I want to make sure that voice then gets translated into Braille so that the screen reader is working appropriately with a Braille display. Also, there are other people in the deafblind community who are not skilled with using Braille, so also figuring out how to make the website and search engine accessible to those who use maybe a different coloring contrast. Sometimes they need to change the format to make it more accessible, like the font size and the background, those sorts of things. Secondly, I was thinking about some information, such as some videos the FCC has seemed to start setting up video sort of vlogs explaining about some of their programs, and I'm trying to find out, is there a way to use that content to search and identify the right video? Some deaf and hard of hearing people, some deaf blind people are not very literate in English, and they may not be able to use the search engine to discover the content using their English skills. So I was also trying to identify some sort of information that could correlate the videos and in a more effective way for those less English literate users and consumers of your website. That's my comment. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for your comments. Excellent.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and we appreciate some of the specific comments you made as well. For example, the need to be high contrast. We'll have a feature of the site that allows you to put it into a high contrast mode, a feature of the site that allows you to change font sizes so that they're larger. And the other comments that you made, I'd love to actually chat a little bit more offline when there's a little bit more time, because these are really valuable comments for us.
Thanks, Ryan. And final comment, question from Fernando.
Got it?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I wanted to actually extend a comment to my fellow CAC members, because I feel like this is actually something on which the Commission has made progress, I think, in some measure due to all of your efforts, initiative, pushing, concern very politely and insistently. So I'm impressed by that, and I'm proud to be here to be part of a group that is actually doing something I think that is very beneficial by providing this feedback. Two questions. One, I didn't hear anything about whether you looked at best practices in other government agencies in the process of your design. I think that's important. If you did, I would like to hear about it, and if you have done it, I hope that you're also sharing back with them, because across the government this is an issue with many websites. The other, so many questions about the accessibility components of the website. I think you have a tremendous opportunity to provide lessons learned both to civil society and to industry about what you've done, what you've learned about your testing. And I encourage you at some point in time to provide an opportunity for us to come in just to hear about that aspect of how you did it, what problems you encountered, how you solved for them, and your consumer feedback, because I think that would be very valuable for all of us to benefit from. And, you know, of course, I look at the CAC as being a two-way process where you're not only getting feedback from our communities, but also what you're learning, we're also benefiting from. So thank you.
Yes, we are looking at best practices. Folks have told us that DHS actually has done a lot in the accessibility realm in terms of their website. Spencer can talk to some of the world-winning or award-winning websites that he has worked on in the federal government. And the accessibility challenge is a challenge. You know, it's very difficult because we're not blind or deaf, so we need your advocates to speak for us and to come up with the ideas like Claude did. It wasn't Claude. Ryan, the previous speaker, about the video blogs. I had never heard that before. So we really encourage and really look forward to the engagement with this group, because having advocates that understand these issues is very helpful for us going forward.
Yeah, what a fantastic concluding comment, question, Fernando. Absolutely, in terms of, there are two sides of the question. So on the one side of the question is we are certainly looking at best practices and even the experience that we've had personally with working on large-scale government websites in addition to and prior to the FCC. So that is absolutely being integrated, and it's been very helpful. On the other side of the coin is, how will we take what we learned here and extend it out to the rest of the government community so that they can integrate those learnings into what they're doing? And at this point, we don't have a specific plan to do that, but I'm so glad that you've brought that to our attention and said, well, let's make sure that we take what we've learned and extend it to the rest of the community, and I'd love to see us do that.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a great conversation. It's been a longer one than I think we all anticipated. We always learn to give certain topics more time. I just want to say that this CAC, unfortunately, this is our last meeting for this chartered CAC, but all these organizations and companies around the table are available to continue to work with you individually as organizations. And when we do get rechartered and reorganized, the CAC will be back up and running in 2015, and look forward to continuing to work with you. And I can see from the valuable questions around the table that there's a lot of interest and knowledge around this table and willingness to work with you on this. So thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you all again for all the input that you've provided along the way. We'll keep gathering it.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
I understand that you're going to have complaint reform next.
Yes, we are.
So complaint reform is also a project that's working on in my group, and it's part of the modernization effort. And Dusty will come and talk to you a little bit, not to steal his thunder, but he started his project by the same principles of research and really understand the consumers and the complaints that are coming in. And you'll be amazed at how he transformed 19 forms into one way to interact with the FCC, and we're really excited about that. So I just want to make a plug for him, and we're integrating the usability of his tool into what Spencer is doing as well.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. So we have a break here on our schedule. Can we do an as-needed break? Because we are a bit behind now in our schedule. This always happens. You know this always happens. And we do have our next speaker here, Michael Karowitz, who is available to come and start talking about the consumer complaint process. Do people need a break right now? Can I take a poll? How many people want to take a 5-minute break? No? Everybody okay to stay at the table? Okay, Michael, come on up. We do have 2 spots, one right there. Here
Sure.
you go, Michael.
And with me today is Kim Wild, who is a legal advisor in CGB.
So Kim, you can come on over here next to me.
Okay.
I'm glad you can take my chair, Michael.
Wouldn't think of it, Scott. Sure.
So I think, as Fernando pointed out, the website and working on the website was something that the CAC brought up as an issue years ago. Consumer complaints and the need to do something about that is another issue that the CAC has brought up time and time again. So we're pleased that the FCC has been working on that. And so thank you, Michael and Kim, for coming and telling us about what you've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to be here once again, and I think the punchline is we're getting pretty close. I certainly heard the words of the previous speakers, and it was pointed out that this is the last meeting of this chartered CAC, and I think when it's all said and done, you're going to be able to look as one of your achievements that you helped the FCC put into place a new consumer complaint system. As you know, as we've talked about in this room before, the chairman committed to Congress to have something in place by the end of the year, and we have often made noises that we would try to beat that deadline, and that is still the story. I think we're weeks away from putting something into place. When it's all said and done, we've talked about this before, some of what I say will be familiar, but when it's all said and done, it's a very simplified sort of view, simplified in terms of what our goals are, but also simplified in terms of what the consumer's interaction is going to be with us through the website and how we interact generally with the consumer. There's three goals of that we hope to achieve, three objectives with a new complaint system. The first is to simplify the consumer experience, make it much easier for them to file a complaint and to get information online. The second objective is to streamline the processing, both on our end to make it, to wring some efficiencies, I think, wring the sponge, as it were, and to capitalize on what the carriers have done on their end. And then the third objective is to make more data available, something that the CAC has spoken of over time. So let me walk you through just very briefly where we are with things. On simplifying the consumer experience, the previous speaker made the point that we are going to go from 19 forms to one complaint intake system. So it'll be much simpler for the consumer. That is something that we see that it works. We've been testing it, and it's something like a TurboTax treatment, where as you input information, more questions are asked of you that are relevant to the type of dispute that you have in mind. So the simplified complaint intake is the first pillar of our simplified consumer experience, and the second is the ability to check status. With the new system, you're going to be able to create an account the very first time you come to make a complaint, and you will be given a password. You'll be able to come back and check on the status of that complaint at any time. And in the future, if you return to our site and file an additional complaint, even on a totally different matter, your login and your password will be valid, and you'll be able to check on all of the complaints you file. One of the things we've spent some time on recently is looking at integrating the consumer education materials that have always been available through the Commission website, through CGB. How can we better integrate them with the filing of a complaint? We see a lot of instances, we hear of a lot of instances where consumers really just have an inquiry, they have a question, and they click on because they want to file a complaint, they have something that's bothering them. But if we had the consumer education materials available on the particular subject of which they were complaining, it would sure make their life easier. They could look at the consumer materials, in some cases find that, oh, I don't need to file a complaint, I don't need to submit something to get an answer to my question, here it is. In other cases, I think what it will do is allow the consumers to hone their complaint a bit, to make sure they're hitting on all the right points, to make it easier for the service provider ultimately to respond to their concerns. So when you go into the new complaint intake system, as you input information, you'll be provided with links that correspond to the subject matter of the subject you're complaining about. So the second objective, streamlining the processing, what we're trying to do internally is just cut the amount of time in which we take to process things. We generally right now send out serves to the service providers once a week, and that creates an expectation that there's a weekly due date from the carriers. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense, and wouldn't it speed up things to the consumer if we could cut that week waiting period out and serve things in real time, or even serve things just once a day? It's going to take a little bit of effort on our part to do that. The technology helps. It'll take some effort for the carriers, too, to make sure that they are responding, that the amount of time, usually 30 days they have to respond, isn't always going to end on the same day every week. It's going to be throughout the week that they'll have things due. So internally, we think we can cut some of our time in processing. Externally, we think, from what we've heard, the service providers are prepared to do that. And if you take those two efficiencies, it means delivering a response to the consumer much more quickly. The other thing to point out about streamlining the processing is the service platform we'll be using is extremely nimble and easy to make adjustments to. We have lived in an environment in the commission, for better or worse. It's taken a lot of time to make changes. As an IT matter, those changes will be relatively quick. We'll be able to do them in-house. And so if we find that we can make a small tweak that will make the material that we're collecting easier for us to read, easier for the service provider to respond to, and make more interesting data, then we can make that tweak. The third objective, which is one that's very important, I think, to everyone, it's been important to the CAC, it's been important to consumer groups, is to make more data available. Currently, you probably know the only complaint data that's out there is what is available through our quarterly reports. We want to do a whole lot more. We want to get much more granular in terms of the topics that we're reporting on. We want there to be more topics. We frankly want to move to an environment where just about everything that comes in, you get to see what it is. You get to see the quantity of it, the amount of what's coming in on a particular topic. As the data comes in and we become more familiar with it and have more time to work with it, we expect a greatly improving presentation over time. We hope that there will be a dashboard relatively soon that will show folks what's going on, have a bunch of modules on it so you can see what's coming in, what's going out to the service providers, and perhaps how they're responding. We've talked a little bit to folks, consumer groups, carriers, and have said that anything the federal government is doing in any agency right now, whether it's the Consumer Finance Protection Board or the Consumer Product Safety Commission, if they're doing something with regard to data involving consumer complaints, that's something that we feel is fair game for us. And so we've told people that and put them on notice. Internally, we want to do a lot more with the data, too. We are going to work with the bureaus and offices on an individual case basis. We're actually going to be meeting with all of them. We've been meeting with them, but we have more meetings planned. The idea here is to let them design reports of what they want, and these reports will be internal, of course, but it will allow them to tailor what they want to get from us. And hopefully complaints will yield some data that they will find valuable in the policy-making process or in the enforcement process. So those are really how we're going to meet the three objectives, where we stand now. Like I said, we're weeks away from doing something, and we're pretty excited about that. I think it's going to be an achievement for us, but I certainly don't overlook that it's an achievement for the CAC as well. So if anyone has any questions, I can take a few.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, I'm going to start to my left instead of to my right this time. Julian, and then we'll go around the room. So, Julian, you want to start?
Yes, thank you. That was a wonderful report and exciting developments, and I have two questions. The first question is, will it be possible for someone to look at the site or at whatever information is available and see that someone has already made a complaint, which they could then, I hate to use the word like, but you know what I mean, right? Agree with, so that perhaps you could then more easily see a trend and people could join the discussion and embellish or add to the original issue instead of beginning anew. And I'll hold my second question until after you answer that.
Yeah, I think that we're putting into place a system that wants to make maximum use of consumer input. I believe it will have the capability to do the sort of thing that you're talking about. I don't know if that'll be available on day one or not. Day one is not the end all, particularly when you have a nimble platform. You can continue to make adjustments to it. We can continue to respond to what people want. So that would be something that we would look to if we don't deliver it on day one.
Interesting question.
Okay, and the second question is, it can be fairly difficult to capture relevant information, and when there's a problem with anything, especially technology, because there may be a need to capture information from a screen, from a bill, and so forth. And an exciting development is, for example, the ability to deposit a check by taking a picture of it. I use my mobile device camera to document problems with technology all the time in my work with medical devices. So if there was a means built in to easily add photos of documents or screens, that probably would simplify the troubleshooting and reduce the burden on the reporter to have the information necessary to solve the problem.
Yeah, that sounds like something that we should consider both, for right now and for future growth of this whole system.
Thank you.
Thanks, Irene.
My question deals with the accessibility of the data for researchers to use to maybe find trends, or I can even imagine I'm here in a volunteer role, but in my work life, I teach consumer studies at Virginia Tech, and I can see student projects to look at the data and see if they can see trends and so forth. And so I was wondering if it's going to be available in a way that we could use it for research projects like that.
Certainly that's the vision. We have spent a lot of time looking at the type of data that we can put out there. There's certainly a sentiment that we are hearing that we are very sympathetic to, of put it all out there. We do want to, we do want to proceed, cautiously, and we do want to have the benefit of some experience. There will be a fair amount of data made available right away, and then over time, as we hone what's coming in and look at it, get more experience rather with what's coming in, I think we can do more and more and more. So we definitely want to move in a direction where this data is going to be out there. There are folks that will use it. Conceivably, there might be opportunities for folks to create their own website, and they would analyze and look at our data. I mean, this is hypothetical, of course, but we think that sort of opportunity might be possible with what we're planning, what we're doing.
Great. Art?
Thank you very much, Michael. This is it's really good to hear there's progress being made, definitely in terms of providing the data in a more granular way. And it was also good to hear you talk about the way that data could be communicated and used by other departments within the FCC. My question was specifically about time frame. You had mentioned that something was happening within the next couple of weeks, and I was just curious specifically what that was. And then if you could drill down a little bit and get a little more granular with the time frame regarding making data more available, that'd be great.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of specifics at the moment. Again, the chairman committed to getting a complaint system in place by the end of the year. We have always worked toward beating that. I think we're just weeks away from going public. At this juncture, I think the consumer interface, the processing has been sort of the front end is what we've been focusing in on early on and getting that up and running. It's the data piece that we're looking at now. The goal is to put as much data out there on day one as we can. But again, this is something that there may not be everything that we want to do on day one, but I would expect soon after, soon after launch.
Okay, great. Thank you, Art. Mitzi, and then Lisa.
Thank you. Mitzi Herrera with Montgomery County, and we do handle consumer complaints. I think it's just, I fully applaud your moving from the 19 forms to one, and as people who participated in trying to do things on there, that is a great, great improvement. The issue I wanted to bring up is, and I asked the previous panel, and they passed it off to you, and I'm a little concerned that we're mixing coming up with a new complaint form with not addressing what the CAC had raised specifically with the Consumer Bureau, which is you take complaints in now, and you used to have available an easy-to-find link on your website in which you reported on a quarterly basis what the top 5 complaints that you had received in a list of the inquiries. And the initial recommendation that we asked you to do was to simply report all the categories every quarter so that you could actually track things from quarter to quarter. We made that recommendation at least 3 years ago, and it was at the time, last time we had a large discussion of this, brought up that the CAC, 3 CACs had mentioned and had worked on this. Now, on your website, you cannot find a link to those reports. Some internal staff in the FCC have said they cannot find those reports, and when you look to the search engine, they don't really come up. So can you tell us what is happening with the reporting of your complaints? Do you have plans to, I mean, I know that it takes time to make new reports, but the reports that you're currently issuing don't seem to be available anymore. And there was a lot of discussion a few CAC meetings ago about actually making some changes to the way that you actually do your reports. Some of the carriers in particular had issues because there were complaints about things that people, third-party users, did over their networks that then ended up getting logged in as carrier complaints.
Yeah, if you go to the FCC.gov website and you look on the bureaus and offices, there's a tab at the top, and you pull it down and you look at CGB. It'll give you CGB's website, and then if you look on the right-hand margin, there's a column with a bunch of things, and there will be consumer complaints report or something like that. That will give you all of the quarterly reports. I checked it at 10:05 this morning in response to your question earlier. They are there, all of them that have been released. The third quarter report, the third quarter just closed. It takes us a few weeks to get those up, so that's imminent that the third quarter report will be up. The CAC recommendation that we report on everything, all categories, all codes, all classifications, we've heard that. That's really what this new system is about in terms of data. That's what we want to do. When we say put it all out there, certainly that is something that's going to be achievable. We're going to be able to, have the ability to report on everything. So instead of being limited to the top 5 areas or the top 10 areas, we will have the ability to put everything out. And so that will be there.
And that's scheduled to happen by the end of this year as well?
I don't know if that'll be on day one of launch, but we absolutely will have the capability to do that.
Okay, and will that also include, Commissioner Pai had asked that data be in sort of more open government format, so maybe it's an Excel file or it's things that are malleable. It's not just a PDF. Is that part of that plan as well? Or is that
and
later?
that was a little bit what I was getting at with the previous question, that this data, we want to put data out there where folks can do what they want with it. They can manipulate it, and as I said, as a hypothetical example, folks could create their own websites. There could be a watchdog website that would analyze our data independently. That is what we are working toward with this new system.
Thanks. Lisa and Ed, and then we'll close things up. We have to move to our next speaker. Thanks. I said Lisa, yeah.
Okay. Lisa Hamlin, Hearing Loss Association. First, thank you. Everything you said sounds terrific. I was particularly, nobody else has mentioned this, but I was pleased that somebody could log in, have a status, go back and check the status. That's particularly wonderful because sometimes consumers say it just gets lost in the void. They have no idea what's going on. And so being able to check what's going on is a big thing. But I just wanted to tag on to what Julian was saying. Not only photos, but for example, when we complain about closed captioning, and if we could take a screenshot, or not just a screen, send a video in of what's happening with the captioning so you could see what was going on, something like that. And again, I don't expect this immediately, but in your plans for the future, if people could file complaints, say, this is what I'm seeing, this is what's going on, rather than to have to describe, well, I missed 3 words here and 4 words there. It becomes more easy to track down, I think, on the side of the person taking the complaint, as well as the person complaining, being able to file that as well. So that was just a suggestion for the future, if that could be thought of to be incorporated. But again, kudos, this is great news for me. It really sounds like, and I just recently got I asked somebody complained about captioning. They said, well, file a complaint. I said, well, it's too hard, it's too much trouble, I don't want to. If you make it simpler for people, I think you're going to see more response to.
And I appreciate that feedback. I think where we're at, and maybe we can all, this can be a principle for future discussions, is I think you're going to like what you see in terms of what we're putting out there. And a lot of the things that we all have been talking about in this room over the course of the past year and even longer, you're going to see all of that when this complaint system is launched. That right away will get a lot of folks who will have a lot of constructive feedback about how we can do even better. And we will appreciate that feedback. Our goal is to first meet some of these long-term concerns that have been expressed by so many people, and then we do want to grow the system. And so maybe one of the things the new CAC can do is give us some constructive feedback sort of on how are we doing with what we said we would roll out, and then also what are the different areas that we can grow into over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever. I think all of the suggestions that I've heard are good ones. There are some agencies that have done a little. There's a few agencies that have done more than what we're doing right now, and I think that what we're going to launch is going to be comparable to any of those agencies, if not a little bit better, I hope. But there's no sense why the FCC can't have a website that continues to blaze new trails. So let's keep all that in mind and talk about that in the future too. More questions? Ed
has one, and then we'll close up. Ed?
I just wanted to take a second and thank Michael and his team for following up on the recommendations that we've been putting forth, for looping us in and having us be part of the dialogue over the past few months as you guys are working to have a completed project. I'm happy to hear you say that you'd like feedback from us to continue as we move forward. I think I speak for a number of people in the room who would be happy to continue to provide that feedback and to keep that dialogue open. We can serve as a sounding board, come to us and we'll look at what's happening and let you know, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate your efforts personally, Ed, and that of the CAC. It's been a very valuable process overall, and in the sense that I do feel like you've been a great sounding board, folks on the CAC, whether it's in these meetings or whether in individual case capacities. Because you've been supportive, and at the same time you haven't hesitated to be constructive in your criticism. And frankly, you've pushed us a bit, and that's been good, because we haven't wanted to just do a cyclical update to a system. We wanted actually to overhaul it. We wanted to have a bit of a revolution in terms of the way we take in complaints. So bear with us for a few more weeks, and then hopefully there'll be something for you to take a look at, and you can give us feedback right from day one.
Michael, thank you so much. We really appreciate all your time and coming here today. Thank you so much. We look forward to this.
All right.
Thank you. And Kim, thank you. Okay, so we are running right along here because we have a hard stop at 11:30. I'll tell you why in a moment. And as I told you before, Michael Connolly is here from the Homeland Security Bureau. He's going to give us a very brief review of what the FCC did at their open meeting last week on Thursday. So thank you so much. Before that, I just want to check the phone line. We do have some guests from overseas who are joining us. I want to make sure that they are not yet on the line. Is there anyone on the line? True. That's why we're giving it a little second. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Welcome.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Scott. My name is not Michael Karowitz. It's Michael Connolly.
Yeah, right. Sorry.
I would love to have that promotion, but not in the cards. Last Friday, the Commission released a report on an outage that took place back in April. It affected, the outage happened, the outage itself happened in Colorado. The affected states were California, Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Minnesota, and the entire state of Washington. And when I say affected, that means that no 911 calls for 6 hours were able to get through. It was obviously a very, very serious event. Excuse me. What I presented last Friday was a discrete report on just this April outage that happened in Colorado. In the introduction to the report, our bureau chief, Dave Simpson, put it in, I would say he put it in greater context and appropriate context in that this was one of 12 massive outages that occurred just in 2014 alone. It's a new type of outage, and it's a new type of outage caused by a new type of calling 911. As a nation, we're transitioning away from legacy PSTN and headed toward IP telephony. In the process, there are hybrid systems that help the transition, but there are some glitches that are happening, and I think both in the interest of time and because I think it expresses it well, there may be fewer outages, but the outages are geographically dispersed. They affect more people, and they have the potential to be longer in time. There have been, since the outage that I reported on happened in April, there have been 9 statewide outages in Hawaii. There was a statewide outage in Vermont in August, and then there was a carrier-wide outage affecting, I think, the chief, Admiral Simpson, the chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. I believe it was 40 million people were affected. So for a certain amount of time, 40 million people were affected by that carrier-wide outage. Not being an engineer, it's a very complicated system, but 20, 30 years ago, you would pick up your phone and there would be a small connection to your local public safety answering point, or PSAP, they call them. It was very straightforward. Now, I find it amazing that I have friends in Walla Walla, they can pick up their phone in Walla Walla, Washington, and it flips to the local carrier who switches it to a third-party vendor who transmits it to Englewood, Colorado, or Miami, Florida, and then the phone call goes back to the most appropriate PSAP in Walla Walla. I find that amazing. Not in a bad way. It's actually quite fascinating. But you have more. The longer the call, the more switches you go through, the more chances there are for a glitch, for a failure. And so what the report identified is, and the recommendations are such that we need to identify where the single points of failure are. We need to stop the glitches to the extent we can. As far as, I'm going to leave it, the chairman, in his closing remarks said, he expects action. And I think that speaks for itself, what happens next. And I think sorry if that was too short, but does anyone have questions that? And I have a article from the Washington Post, came out a couple of hours ago. It's pretty short. It'll tell you about the presentation and about the. Yeah, exactly. And I'll send
We
that
have
out
a
to you.
question right here to my left.
Yes, sir.
Chris, raise your.
Do we know yet how many lives were affected, or were there?
Yeah, there were no loss of life. The most dramatic example was and this was in the news in Washington State. Most dramatic example, it was a drunken guy trying to break into someone's house, or he thought he was entering his own house, and the woman in the house dialed 911 37 times and couldn't get through. So I don't know if I mentioned there were 6,600 failed calls that did not go through. Now, a lot of those, just for perspective, a lot of those were repeats, 37 times. So as far as the number of discrete callers, I don't know that. But we've been lucky so far that there have been no fatalities. And that's pretty much the first question we always ask, was there any fatalities? What was the real life damage? I don't know if you remember the DeRate show from 2 years ago. Similarly, they were. You remember that? Yeah. Well, we had three. I'm in Falls Church, and we had 3 trees come crashing down. So there was no loss of life in that. But again, we can't. We need to do something to make sure these type of glitches don't happen. And it is the future. It's what's happening. It's not. This is the way IP telephony is going to roll out. And again, there's some. I want to qualify that what happened in Englewood, Colorado, was a hybrid system. It was kind of a step between legacy and IP, but. The larger point is this is the way we're headed, so we need to get it right from the get-go.
Hold on just 1 second, Michael. Can I check on the phone to see if our callers have joined us? Anyone on the call? Scott, it's now 11:30 exactly. So is there anything we need to do to get these callers on, or are they supposed to just beep in?
They're supposed to be dialing into us.
Okay, they're going to dial into us. So can we just continue to talk until they dial in?
Yes.
Because it looks like we have another question.
I'll make sure that somebody's monitoring that line.
Julian has a question, and so if we could just continue to talk. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's also the photographer, too, if you want to do that.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, if you want.
All right, Julian. Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay, mic is on.
Right.
So thank you for the report. And certainly in an interconnected world, the more connections, the more opportunities there are for disruption. And in general, there are approaches that are used for that, either alternate ways of communicating, different pathways through multiple nodes. The Internet is built on that resiliency inherently.
Right.
for some environments, there is a decision made to have local information or local means of expertise when one loses connectivity to a larger network. It doesn't sound like that's even a possibility here, although it might be. So I'm wondering, you described the problem and the characterization of it and a goal to avoid it in the future, which is obvious. But the solution pathway could go in many different directions. And hoping, of course, it will happen again, so that's not an issue. These things will continue to happen, and probably with increasing frequency, although if the solutions are in place, the end users may never know, ideally, just like we don't know when there's another disruption in the Internet.
Sure.
So can you add some specificity to the plan? Is it too early now to know?
If you can hold on a few weeks.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Well, I have a quick question, which is this issue part of one of the issues within the IP trials that are being considered?
At least tangentially. I don't know specifically, but at least tangentially, yeah.
Mitzi, can I just check to see if there's any connection on the phone? Okay, we'll keep going. Mitzi?
It's sort of tap dancing. Mitzi Hura from Montgomery County, Maryland. Can you talk about what kind of systematic or organized effort are you having in your conversations with the local PSAP providers, and then also in local governments where they've been making the transition to new IP-based next generation services? Are you having, I know that we have people and they talk ad hoc with the FCC on a routine basis.
Sure.
But are you doing a kind of systemic, you have a working group compiled, you have monthly, quarterly, annual calls, something?
I don't know the answer, but can we follow up on that?
Yes, because some of the systems are the same. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they vary on the basis of which legacy ILEC they initially were using. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that in Montgomery County, we actually have an issue in that there was a city which moved counties. It used to be in 2 counties, and now it's in 1 county. And we actually haven't been able to move those telephone lines into a single county. They still actually go to 2 counties, and there's now an agreement between them that they will reroute those calls, which again adds to a delay in response. So there's a lot of things happening at the local level that it would be useful to have incorporated as these things are going out.
Right. I don't have a card. Do you? Yeah. And I will follow up. Thank you.
Any other questions for Michael? Steve?
I just, I'm Steve with ACI. It seems like, kind of going back through technology of the decades ago, it almost seems like things are set up in like the old mainframe setup where all the intelligence is one area, where today all the computing is at everyone's site. So maybe there needs to be another paradigm to make this work as we look to moving towards an IP transition, that we're trying to fit this through some centralized computing when that old paradigm doesn't fit with sort of the new technology and the of advanced communications. I just don't know. I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. Anything else around the table? Okay. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Oh, okay. You'll leave these for us, and we'll get this. We'll get the link to Paul too.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you. All right. So, sit tight. We are supposed to have someone from overseas join us by phone at 11:30. It's now 11:35. Scott went to check to see if that person is indeed joining us. We have another activity which we potentially were supposed to have right before 11:30, which was a group photo. But we just sent him out thinking we didn't have time, but now we potentially could have time. So let's go get him back. Okay, so don't anyone move, because we're going to have a photo.
You do
Apply,
have Tim
apply
Walden
lipstick
on the line?
appropriately. Oh, is someone on the phone?
Yes, this is Tim Walden with CenturyLink.
Betty, want to tell Roger that we will not be doing it now? Okay. Tim?
Yes.
Tim Walden. And is Dave Russell on?
Dave, I believe, had a different number. He should be dialing in now.
Fantastic. Hold tight for just a moment. Tim, where are you joining us from?
I'm actually in Northeast Louisiana.
Oh, you're from Louisiana. Fantastic.
Some people recognize it as a different country.
I think most people recognize Washington, D.C. as a different country.
Oh. Now, Dave is in Amsterdam. He was having a problem dialing in. I give him the number that I dialed into, so he may join. But I'll be glad to start.
Scott Marshall, who's sitting next to me with the FCC, says that will not work, that he has to use a different number.
He has to use a 646 number.
Scott. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, Tim. He has to use a 646 international number that I sent to him.
He's got the 646-746-3008.
That's correct.
But it's not working.
It's not working.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's had other international calls, and
no, I
it doesn't
understand.
seem to be a problem on his side. But again, I'll be glad to start the discussion.
Yeah, if you can start the discussion, and I'll see if I can get him another phone number.
Okay. Yeah, I think he'd sent you an email about 10:35 Central Time today. So.
Do you have the email? Well, why don't we get started with Tim? Tim, thank you. You're with CenturyLink, as you mentioned, an engineer. You're going to talk about powering the CPE and the IP transition and why this is important to consumers. We know it is very important to consumers. So thank you for joining us. It's an issue that I know our IP transition working group has been discussing, and we thought that even though this group won't be meeting for a while, we thought it was a good issue for us to talk about with our own transition. But the IP transition being such an important issue, and power being such an important issue to the IP transition, that we appreciate your talking to us today about it.
Yeah. And really what I was prepared to kind of share with you, and Steve had gotten with Dave and I, as many of you are aware and some may not be, CSRIC Council of the initiated from the FCC. I'm actually on the CSRIC Council. In addition to the CSRIC Council responsibilities, they also ask me and Brian Allen with Time Warner Cable, to co-chair a working group 10 in this CSRIC environment, specific to CPE powering challenges related to VoIP application. So just to give you a little bit of background, we actually broke this charter into two individual deliverables. The first deliverable was associated with customer education and outreach. Many of you are aware, as the technology has continued to evolve, specifically away from narrowband services into a lot of focus around broadband and IP-based services, there's been a tremendous amount of technology introduction and a tremendous amount of architectural change as it relates to specifically voice. Voice has migrated, as you know, from a specific network entity into an application. So first and foremost, we felt that it was very important to first provide a given set of best practices just to allow that education and outreach to the customer base associated with, because many consumers may or may not realize that their service and the service architecture has changed, albeit they've got more new and shiny features, a lot of collaboration type features that VoIP brings to the table. They may not realize that the architecture has changed. The second deliverable, deliverable 10B, was more focused around technology and technology best practices as we think about how might we document and put together best practices specifically around network and application resiliency. So that's where Dave Russell has provided a lot of informal leadership to the working group. There were a number of a number of use cases that were established as part of the 10B report. There were 9 individual use cases, all associated with very unique and common practices relative to VoIP services in the marketplace today. And with each one of those use cases, it was established what would be both the service provider, the network provider, the application provider, as well as the consumer's responsibility and accountability relative to the resiliency and our battery backup for that application. Kind of going into it just a little bit more background here. I mentioned that voice has migrated from a simple and dedicated network to an application. With that has been the introduction of, you've got network service providers that in many instances provide an underlying broadband mechanism for point A to point B communications. You've got a service provider that may or may not be the network provider. And then you've got an application provider in many instances that may be either a soft client or some other value add in the chain. And then probably the most challenged environment that we have is the fourth, which is the introduction of consumer electronics and CPE. So as you look at the report that was provided to the CISRIC Council, Report 10B, these use cases are specifically address some of the challenges and our best practice specific to the myriad of application that the 4 individual players in the VoIP space may or may not be providing. The other thing is as the network has migrated or evolved from a network-based power to localized power, because of optical access, consumer-based electronics, and the like, that's a challenge. Battery backup is increasingly being offered as an option to the customer. End users, they do have a desire for choice and flexibility, both for their service as well as they're extremely cost sensitive. Another problem that the team has worked through or is working through is that the life cycle and maintenance of UPSs and batteries are complicated. There's multiple devices out there. Not all of them are user friendly. There's a life cycle issue associated with each. And again, as we work through as the team, there was a desire and a need for potential solutions for extended backup periods. We've had storms like Katrina and Rita, Sandy. You've got power brownouts and blackouts, all of which some are measured in minutes, some are measured in hours, others are measured in days and weeks. So how do we think about the communication and the need for service transparency in an environment that commercial power may be out for days, if not weeks, in the event of a storm. So again, 9 use cases were put together. Everything from the ATA function being in a network device all the way through to the ATA being in a phone set that was bought at a big box consumer electronics store, cellular handsets via femtocell, wireless home phone devices. But again, each of these devices we looked at, and we've determined that for the most part, with the exception of standalone ATA devices, which are primarily provided out of big box retailers or wholesalers, the other use cases we believed that there were a good path to battery backup and service resiliency, no matter whether you're dealing with a network provider, a service provider, or an application provider. There were some issues that we ran into as we thought about kind of the life cycle of the battery backup and some of the challenges that we had, and we did request further consideration from the CISRIC Council for potential forward-looking consideration. Now, we're not sure if these considerations will be picked up by a subsequent CISRIC, or if this is something that ADIS needs to work on. But if you think about some of the challenges that we have with a localized power solution, we do think that further evaluation of battery and our alternative power technologies probably should be looked at. Is there a need for more of a commodity-based power source, so UPSs that use things like D-cell batteries, in the event that there's a multi-day or multi-week solution, commodity-based power solutions such as D-size flashlight batteries and the like, to be able to continue to power VoIP communications may be something that the industry needs to look at. Dynamic power utilization is one. Basically having some intelligence, baseline intelligence in the UPSs, so in the event of a power outage, the device goes to sleep where you don't have ring voltage sitting there all the time. And we believe that dynamic power utilization could give you a longer life in the event of a power outage. And alternative solutions such as solar or power over Ethernet, from a standardized standpoint, we believe that could provide some resiliency into this space. As we thought about consumer electronics, one of the things that was glaring, that didn't seem to be a lot of standardization associated with these interfaces, DC power supplies and other interfaces specifically around UPSs and consumer electronics. There's just a lot of variation there that drives considerable cost into both the end user as well as the service provider. And maybe there should be some views into further standardization. So again, it's just a high level. I just wanted to kind of give that background and then kind of tee up my understanding from Steve that this council may have some questions specifically around the work or any points of clarity that we can drive at this point.
So thank you very much, Tim. I failed to mention at the outset that Steve Posiak was very helpful in arranging your joining us this morning. Steve is also part of the, is it a working group? What do we call the group that you're on with Tim?
The CISRIC working group, yes,
CISRIC
working group 10.
And so he was helpful in arranging for you to join us this morning. Appreciate that, Steve. So does anyone have any questions for Tim? Yeah, Ed.
I noticed in looking at the working group membership and just kind of in listening to the discussion that there wasn't any representation really from electric companies or public utility commissions. I noticed that there is somebody from the state of Pennsylvania who was on the working group, but wasn't clear what their capacity was. And I'm just wondering if, battery backups don't need to last for 3 days if the power doesn't go out for 3 days. Living in an area where in the last 3 or 4 years I've had multiple 3-day outages at my home on more than one occasion. What are we doing to kind of bring the public utilities in line, or the power companies in line with their part of the shared responsibility here, that, we don't want to trim trees and then the lines go down and we don't have power for 3 days. Well, now every device in our home doesn't work because we don't have power for 3 days. So is there a dialogue going on there? Is there a different venue that needs to be taking place? Do some of us at the table here maybe have a role in pushing for that dialogue to start happening or to occur? I'll kind of leave it there and just...
Yeah.
Yeah. And the gentleman speaking, Ed, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. No, Ed, excellent question. It actually did come up as we were doing the readout within the CISRC Council. Unfortunately, power companies, as you're dealing with, an FCC-based working group charter, it was specifically focused and chartered within what can network providers do. I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, if we can improve the resiliency of the power infrastructure, and we could limit or eliminate power outages, my work with this working group would have been done in a matter of minutes. But to your point, specific to your question, no, it was really power companies were outside of the purview of the working discussion. This specifically was what can us as network providers, service providers, application providers, how can we deal with these types of events? And actually didn't really address the root cause, which is the power issue.
What about the second part of that with the state utility commissioners?
Yeah, I mean, the individuals that we had with the state were specifically focused on communications network. We didn't feel like that we had enough of a deep-rooted environment to be able to, in the time frame that we had, deal with the power companies themselves. But that is a good point that we probably need to address.
Irene?
This is Irene Leach. I'm with the Consumer Federation of America. Did you consider involving some of the folks from electric cooperatives, because some of them are trying to do some broadband over the electric lines and so forth? So it seems like that, and certainly the rural areas are very underserved when it comes to broadband. That might be a way you could bridge it, because they are getting involved.
Right, and we did from a use case perspective, albeit 9 use cases is by no means all inclusive to the myriad of possibilities that VoIP or voice applications could be. We did include in the use cases all potential service providers. So co-ops from a communication standpoint, and their architectures were included. But as I'd mentioned before, there wasn't a lot of focus, nor did we have a lot of resource that could add any potential solution to how you could build a more resilient power infrastructure, whether that be alternative power solution, either less centralized and more distributed. The team just didn't go there. We just didn't have the resources, represented from a power utility perspective to bring any real substance to that point.
Lisa?
This is Lisa Hamlin from Hearing Loss Association. And I'm not sure whether your committee looked at this or not. And so if I'm wrong, just tell me this is not something you dealt with. But it's something I'm hearing more and more from consumers, which is that consumers with hearing loss get something called a caption phone. And some of those phones are analog. But there is nothing like those phones. So if somebody has an analog phone and particularly these are older people, they move into a new place where they only have access to digital lines or to IP lines. They're stuck. And so I'm wondering if, and in some cases, we've seen consumers with a captioned phone that actually is digital and can carry, is actually, you have to have both broadband and a phone line to make it work, but they're getting connections that do not carry data. So the question is, are you looking at those kinds of use cases? I know that at one point Gallaudet University had a representative on CISRIC. I don't know if they're still there, and I don't know if you're looking at that kind of thing.
This particular working group was specifically focused on, how do we maintain service transparency in the event of a power outage, and the issues were that, the network of old was a, very centralized power solution that was distributed via copper pair to the home versus the local power option. So service transparency relative to the applications we did not pick up. But I will tell you from the work that we have, in the event that, the ATAs in themselves, just that function is the analog telephone adapter should allow most of your 2,500 sets to be compatible. The issue that I can't answer is that are all sets in the event that you convert to VoIP and SIP trunking, is some of that analog messaging lost in some first generation or second generation phone sets, and I'm just not an expert there. But I will tell you that the ATA function will allow you, and some of the challenges that we've got with localized versus distributed power is by having that ATA function at the home, but it will allow you to connect analog phone sets back into the digital or to the VoIP infrastructure. The piece that I can't answer with certainty is there a generation or generations of phones that aren't compatible with SIP trunking and signaling, and is all that information, much like we saw when we converted you convert networks and making sure that your caller ID data comes through. I can't answer that for the some of the first generation phones in SIP.
And finally, Mitzi, last word.
This is Mitzi Herrera from Montgomery County, Maryland. The report is very interesting, and I think thank Steve and Barry for getting that forwarded on to the group. Sort of taking the inverse of Ed's question, since the primary participants in this working group were telephone or telecom companies who are responsible, and a lot of the case studies that you were looking at, it was based on the assumption that the commercial provider, power provider, has an interruption, and that these were different case studies. In your list of recommendations, can you give us a general sense? Was there a sense that these are recommendations that these industry groups would be moving forward with, or that the FCC should implement requirements across the board for them, or what is the general status of these? Because some of these were very good, and they are issues in which we have received a lot of consumer feedback and need for. This is a really good first step forward, but the real meat of it is, when's it going to get done?
Yes. So just to share with you my understanding of how the formality of the CISRIC Council and those recommendations, how do they basically come into requirements in the industry? Basically, we have submitted our recommendation to the FCC Council and to the CISRIC Council. It was ratified. So with that ratification, the FCC technical group is looking at all of those best practices and will be publishing those best practices into the industry, of which, basically, lack of a better term, they govern. So in the event that, again, you'll have a given set of best practices that will be pushed through the FCC and saying, this is the way that we expect our network providers, service providers, applications providers to behave in this space. AKA one, you shouldn't put a VoIP service into the marketplace from a commercial standpoint without the ability for it to be battery backed up. So those things will be pushed through. Now it'll be up to FCC Chairman Wheeler and his staff as to work through exactly how that will be audited and governed. I will tell you from the FCC staff's perspective, they're very much, just to kind of coin what the chairman has shared publicly, he's very much in an environment to govern via self-governance until what time that doesn't work, and then it'll become more of a legislative type of solution. So I do know that from follow-up that I've had with my FCC liaisons as we've wrapped up this working group is that they are in the process of not only this working group's best practice but some of the others, and getting those pushed through and communicated to the associated network providers, service providers, and applications providers as these best practices were ratified with CISRIC. So did that answer your question?
I think it answers as much information as you have.
That's where we are. But again, I do know as being with a large communication and network provider in the United States, we do. As we're setting up policies and practices, and we're setting up services, we've got vast regulatory teams that's constantly out there looking at those best practices and determining, the direction that we go and are we in compliance. So I can tell you from my company's perspective, we take these very serious and implement based on, the best practices that are done and the FCC guidance. So that's probably the best that I can answer that right now, is just from my company's perspective.
Hold on, Scott.
Thank you very much, Tim. We have no more questions around the table. You've done a great job of holding up your end, and we're very apologetic that we couldn't get Dave to make the connection. I think we came up with a solution about 5 or 10 minutes ago, but at that point it seemed like it probably was too late to get started with his presentation. So we apologize. We thank you very much for all your time. We had some good questions around the table, and thank you for an important topic within the IP transition.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity you guys have. I know that Steve has distributed, as you've mentioned, the material. As individually or as a group, as you look at this and have further questions or have need points of clarity, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be glad to share with you what we can on this very important topic.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm sure that when the CAC gets reorganized again in 2015, this will continue to be an issue. So thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay. We are just about at the lunch hour. Don't anyone move. We've got the photographer back who's going to take our picture. And we're going to, before we get up, I have one thing that I want to do, Roger. So the photographer can just think about where he wants us for a second. Before we do that, we have two things that we're going to do during lunch, and then again, one thing that we're going to do from that 2 to 3 o'clock hour. We have the Disability Working Group that are going to meet at approximately 12:30, and we have a room number, 12, is it 12? I'm going to say it wrong.
Yeah, TW.
12 TW 4A442, which is straight down the corridor here. So after you've had an opportunity to give the interpreters a break, finish your lunch, you can head on down the corridor. Or you can finish your lunch down there, but we just need to give the interpreters a break. Okay, then as we mentioned, we have the opportunity to do the beta testing of the website. They have 2 computers to do that. so 2 at a time. They said it would take 10 minutes for each person to do that. I'd like a show of hands to see how many people want to do that beta testing today. So if you could do that, keep your hands up, and I'm going to take down your names, and then right after the pictures, I will assign you a time. So I've got Paul, Mitzi, Claude, Art, I'm sorry, you're then Robert, can't see your card, Ryan, Irene, and you need to do it at lunchtime, Stephen, Ed, and Chris. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Did I miss anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is there anyone other than Irene that has to do it during lunchtime? Okay, Robert and Irene. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is it okay for everybody else to do it at 2 o'clock? It would just make things easier, I think, because we're not going to have a lot of time at lunch. Okay, perfect. So, Robert and Irene, you have your choice of time during lunch. I'm not going to assign you times.
From 4 to 3.
Right? And everybody else will just work on times from 2 to 3. Okay? Perfect? Done. All right, photo time.
Get everybody up here on the dais, please. Lunch.
Welcome back, everyone. We are ready to start. We have recommendations from 2 working groups. So thank you on our final CAC to have 2 recommendations. That's great.
We're working until the very end.
We're working, or are we? We're always working.
The very end, yes.
So we're going to take up the Consumer Empowerment Working Group's recommendation first, and I want to give great thanks to Ed Bartholomew for all the work that he has done. His leadership has been exemplary.
Great, thanks.
And I really appreciate, Ed, all the work that you have done and your working group to continue to work on all the great issues. Ed really took the lead on this mobile device security issue and coordinated some meetings with the Technology Advisory Committee, another FACA at the FCC, and coordinated some joint meetings on this issue, and then came up with a recommendation for our working group. So I'm really pleased that Ed did that work with the other working group of that FACA, and it's great. So thank you. Take it away, Ed.
So the kind of genesis for this recommendation was we were sent a request, a joint request from Chris Monteith and also from Admiral Simpson over in the Homeland Security Bureau. And the task that was put before us was look at the mobile device landscape and the mobile environment with an eye to consumer best practices. What can we do to better educate consumers about the tools that they have at their disposal, the things that are already on the device, maybe some enhancements, improvements, and technological advancements that could come down the road. How can the FCC be providing a fuller education environment around that? What can we suggest in terms of supplementing the things they already have? And then there was also discussion about some future things that the TAC is going to keep looking towards and working towards. They have a meeting after ours in December, and I think that they're going to have some things teed up for that December meeting that further build upon the things that we're laying out today in our recommendation. It's timely because this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so it's good to have a recommendation about mobile device security and privacy during the month of October, and I think we've come up with some pretty good things here. It was distributed in advance, so I think everybody's had a chance to look at it.
And it's in your packets on the right-hand side.
Yeah, it's in your packets. So that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
So do I hear a motion to move the recommendation? Thank you, Bob. And so now discussion. Krista?
Thank you so much. I would like to also thank Ed for all his hard work on this recommendation. He did a great job. We just have a few minor nits to the item that we'd like to suggest for your consideration. In paragraph 3.
So you want to offer some amendments?
Yes, 3 amendments. Very minor. The first in paragraph 3, last part of the sentence where it says consumers need to familiarize themselves on the security needs, I would say with the security needs and privacy concerns of their devices. So change the word on to with in the third paragraph. That's the first one. The second amendment we suggest is number 6, where it says adopting policies to encourage innovation in mobile device security and privacy. We would drop adopting policies to and instead say encouraging innovation in mobile device security and privacy. And the third and final, very minor amendment would be in number 7. After the words security best practices, insert a comma. That is all.
Let me ask Ed. So Ed, do you want to take these as a whole or individually?
We can take them as a whole.
Take them as a whole?
Unless anyone's really excited about commas and wants to fight on that one.
Just maybe that the first and the third be taken, and then the adopting one be taken separately. Because the first two, I think, are punctuation.
Okay.
Right.
I think that's a fine idea. So those seem to be friendly amendments that just want to go for those?
Sounds good.
And accept those? Yes. Ed?
Yes.
Okay, so those two will be considered friendly amendments. And do we need to even vote on that?
No.
Okay, consensus on that? Everybody okay with that? Okay. So, do we need to have a motion on that amendment?
Yep.
Okay, so so we will consider this 6, deleting adopting policies 2 as an amendment. So do I need a motion for that amendment?
Replacing it with language
we're deleting the word adopting policies 2. So someone want to move that as an amendment? You want to move that as an amendment, Krista? Okay, a second on that? A second on that. Discussion. Mitzi?
So my question on that is, was the intent of the working group to have the FCC come up with enforceable standards or policies, or is it more of you're just looking that the industry should just voluntarily work on these things and the FCC should encourage it?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that it wasn't necessarily, I don't think the way that the language was, our intent behind the language was not for the commission to come up with policies or a proposed rulemaking or anything like that. It was more of a fostering an environment that allows for. So I don't have any strong opposition to changing it to say encouraging as opposed to the policy, the wording that was there previously.
And just to clarify, to keep it in correct grammatically, it would be encouraging rather than encourage.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The amendment carries. So number 6 now reads, encouraging innovation in mobile device security and privacy. Okay, any further discussion on the recommendation? Yes, Mitzi.
Okay, I have several, and I sort of try to understand this. So first off, for number 8, regarding the complaint call center, is the FCC currently accepting these types of complaints or issues?
I'm going to go out on a limb here, not being with the FCC. I don't want to answer for them, but my understanding is that if they got a call along this, with a call from someone who had this possible issue, they would probably try to provide them with educational resources. I don't know that they would track cell phone theft or something along those lines as a complaint per se. But I could see a way where a consumer could word or phrase something that they would take it in as a complaint and then share that with a carrier for a response. Our goal behind that action item was just to encourage them to make sure that any new best practices or educational content that they develop, that they're also sharing that with consumers who call in with similar questions on this topic or other similar topics to this.
Okay, so let me maybe go at a sort of 10,000-foot level and ask, is the purpose of the recommendation really focused solely on what the impact, and having consumers be better aware of the impact of when you lose or your device is stolen? Because the concern I have is that in here you have sort of said security and privacy should be combined and talked about together because consumers look at it that way. And there are many other things regarding privacy of consumer data that I think are bigger issues. So I'm just trying to figure out if I'm unfairly conflating them or if your intention was not to deal with that.
I think that the approach of the recommendation and the guidance we were given as to what was being requested was more heavily reliant on security. I think that we are acknowledging the fact that there have been studies and there's data out there that shows consumers don't separate security and privacy, and that's why we've mentioned that in the recommendation. I would say that our goal was not to tackle all of the big picture issues of privacy in this. I think that there are some elements of security and privacy that go hand in hand, and if there was educational content that could be developed to address those specific things, then it's appropriate to cover both together at the same time. Does that clarify that a little bit?
Yeah. So these would be the specific amendments given in that context that I would look for. In the second paragraph, at the very beginning where the CTIA and the various other groups are mentioned, there is a way to delete and before carriers and add local governments and consumer organizations, because I do feel that I know in my local government that we have been doing a lot with educating people about security of these devices. It's a big issue for us because we have people who access our systems both from mobile devices that are issued by the county as well as they access from personal devices, and that has been a big thing with various companies, is that people are using their personal devices. So that would be the first one.
Sorry, local governments and
consumer organizations.
Okay.
The second amendment would be in item 4. Is it possible to add by deleting on the first line, deleting the and? I'm open to the language, but to me, what comes to mind is Google and Facebook. That if the recommendation is to improve consumer experience and usability as it relates to security and privacy enhancing techniques. To me, it's not just the devices or the providers, but it is some of those major sites where your personal information, either your Gmail account, your Facebook, your Twitter, where those things are stored and they're accessible on your personal device by virtue of having put in a password, that those companies themselves can take steps, and they should be encouraged to take steps that enable you, if your device is lost or stolen, to address that. So I don't know if it's, as the amendment is, I'm not sure how you would classify, I don't know a good overarching term to pick up Google and Facebook, so I'm open if somebody's got.
I think you could use app developers. Because I mean, I feel like what you're kind of trying to tease out there is the way that applications are making use of.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess the second amendment would be if we could add in there and OS and app developer, applications developers. Would be the second.
Does anybody have any thoughts on how that would be worded? OS developers and app developers, or
is it applications, just to be spelled out?
We could.
It might get harder. I mean, I think from our perspective, a lot of this was looking towards ways to both expand on existing tools, but also educate. And at least from my company, to the extent we go well beyond that, it might be a little harder to get a consensus real time for changes. But I'll just put that out there.
And I think too that there's that part of it is limited to the scope of what's under the FCC's purview. Yeah. And I don't know that Facebook would fit into that bucket currently. So I think in limiting it to those elements, we're talking about what specifically is within the scope of the FCC's.
Okay, I would withdraw that, and we could take it up a different time. Under number 7, in the first line after where it says developing new FCC hosted, I think you need a hyphen there, FCC hosted educational materials. And what I would suggest is that we insert somewhere in there, either there or at the end, is including materials either targeted or designed to reach consumers with disabilities. Because I think that there are some, it would be good for the commission to have a specific focus on security and campaigns targeted to people who are using accessible devices.
How about just saying those that are, including those that are accessible? Developing new FCC-hosted education materials, including those that are accessible?
I would probably ask the question is, are you trying to accomplish making sure that the materials that we're suggesting right in this, that are already being suggested in this action item, are made in an accessible format? Or are you getting at that there should be additional educational material specifically designed to cover the unique devices that people with disabilities might need to make use of?
The latter, because I would assume that the FCC would always attempt to make whatever consumer information it has that it puts out accessible. But I think that there may be a need to have a specific campaign that is not just the same materials, but it's actually designed and addresses some of the concerns that you will have on accessible devices.
I would probably defer to some comments from members of the disability group.
Might be a separate point.
And maybe that's a separate recommendation to come up, or
maybe develop some separate language for that. Julian, do you have an answer to this particular one, or is it another one? You do. Okay.
Yeah, I think the way number 7 is worded is just a bit complicated, and I think there are two thoughts here. The first is that developing new education materials on specific topics. That's the point. And the rest is an enumerated suggestion list.
Right.
So it could stop there and say, these could include, and then just, but are not limited to, and then just put the list in there. That's it.
Okay, but that doesn't address the other
It does.
question, does it? Or you're saying include that in the list?
Yeah. It's a
Would
list.
that- would
Unless
that
you're
do
trying
it?
to limit the list to just these things, I think these are. I don't know are you intending to limit the list to only these things, or these are suggestions?
Well, he
or-
says such as.
Such as, right. So I think it's just a matter of
It's
clarifying.
not limiting.
Not limiting, and add another one, and these are examples of what could be covered. It's just the sentence construction is a bit confusing in that way.
So in that vein, then you would just say developing new FCC-hosted educational materials on specific topics.
Period. These could include.
These topics.
Yep. Yeah.
Could include, but are not limited to.
And then start the list.
Start the list, and then could we add at the end and
Anything you
materials?
Exactly.
Designed to address.
Paul has something here.
Paul Schrader, AFB. I would support perhaps adding, I like Mitzi's line of thinking, the adding accessibility considerations, because I'm by no means an expert on this, but I have a sense that it's quite possible that there are things related to the interface changes that are tied to accessibility that could be challenges, or at least are worthy of ensuring that we're paying attention to for security purposes. That is to say, there may be holes that are created, there may be challenges that are created specific to accessibility in the iOS, Android, or other ecosystems.
Do you have some language that you think
So
would be helpful,
I
Paul?
guess I would say, I don't know, I've sort of lost track of how this is worded now, but adding at the end the impact of accessibility, the impact of accessible design on security, or something along those lines.
Maybe the relationship between security and accessibility, because they each affect each other that way.
Yeah, I think it would be good to look at for sure. Maybe relationship is the right way to look at it.
Could it just be something like issues related to security of accessible devices?
This is Lisa.
Lisa?
I'm struggling to think of how, for me, using, cybersecurity means pretty much the same. I use text, I use voice, and it'd be the same as for everyone else. I'm trying to think of people who use, for example, FaceTime, video communication. Would that be different? Or is this covered in the educational material? So that's the kind of thing I would think of. And I don't know of any of, I don't know for the community of people I work with if there's any special issues. So, but I would say for what you last said, I would add maybe and communication. So it's not just a matter of the devices, but whatever communication happens. Okay, and can you repeat what you said too? Because that's.
Yeah. So at the end, right now it would say security tips when accessing public Wi-Fi hotspots and security issues related to accessible communications and devices?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm sorry, say that again.
And security issues related to accessible communications and devices.
Issues related to accessible To communications and accessible devices?
Either way. Either accessible communications and devices or accessible communications and accessible devices. Somebody's got to be an English major in here.
Too long ago.
All right, can someone do a read back? Ed, do you have a read back? Who has a?
Last one.
Well, I think someone has to read back
Okay.
7 entirely to see if we've got something we can agree upon here, so we can move on.
I can give you everything up until that last little tidbit.
All right, let's see if we can do it together. Then go.
Developing new FCC-hosted hyphenated education materials on specific topics. These topics could include, but are not limited to, mobile payment security best practices, the importance of two-factor authentication, security tips when accessing public Wi-Fi hotspots,
And security issues related to accessible communications and devices.
Does that sound okay to you, Ed?
I think I'm more partial to the relationship between security and accessibility, but I think if the greater consensus is toward a more narrow, I feel like that's a more broad suggestion, and that this is a more narrow suggestion. And my preference would be to default to more broad in saying the relationship between, because I think Paul brings up a really interesting point in that some of that overlaying technology that makes it accessible could introduce security issues that aren't being considered or discussed. And I think that in addressing it from a relationship standpoint, it leaves it broad to explore that fully.
Would you read
More
yours,
fully.
your version out? Relationship between.
The relationship between security and accessibility. So it would say when accessing public Wi-Fi hotspots and the relationship between security and accessibility.
Lisa?
That works for me.
Fine with me.
That sounds right to Paul as well.
Okay. Okay, so what I have for number 7, in terms of changes, is a hyphen between FCC and hosted, a comma between best practices and the importance, and then at the end, no, there's more than that. After specific topics, a period, and then it says
These topics could include but are not limited to.
These topics could include but are not limited to mobile payment security,
Best
correct?
practices.
Best practices,
The
comma,
The importance
blah,
of
blah.
two-factor authentication, comma, security tips when accessing public Wi-Fi hotspots, comma, and the relationship between security and accessibility, semicolon.
Okay. Do I have someone to move this amendment? Language for 7? Bob? Second? Art? Seconds. Any further discussion on this amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? No abstentions, thank you, Scott. Any further discussion on this recommendation?
Can I ask one last? In the broadband working group, we had been looking at the national broadband plan. So as part of that, there is actually recommendations in there that relate to both privacy and cybersecurity. So what I'm wondering is whether you want to amend number 9 to have something like implementing the the privacy and cybersecurity recommendations of the National Broadband Plan, or whether you view that as sort of beyond the scope of what you intended.
I would say beyond the scope of what we intended, and mainly because this is in response to a specific request around device and mobile security and that sort of thing. So it was a narrowly focused request, and I think that we should, as much as we can, keep this kind of focused towards a response to that. I think it would be better, and I think probably moving forward we can look at that as a separate recommendation.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I think it's time to call the question on the recommendation. All those in favor of the recommendation as amended signify by saying aye and raising your hand, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? The recommendation passes unanimously, Scott.
Yep, got it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ed, and working group. Okay, we are going to take a brief change here before we go to our disability working group and welcome Bob Aldrich to the table. Bob was unable to come this morning when the CGB was here, and so he was very willing to come back this afternoon for a brief discussion. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, and I apologize for missing this morning's session. I'm here, I'm a legal advisor at CGB, and I'm here as a substitute for Karen Peltz-Strauss, who usually gives this presentation but is on vacation. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that DRO and CGB have been doing in the disability area since your last meeting, and four in particular. For the program for distributing equipment to people who are deaf-blind. This was established under the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act to support the better distribution of such equipment to low-income individuals who are deaf-blind. We issued a public notice on August 1st seeking comment on how to modify the rules to make this the permanent program more effective and more efficient. Also in August, we issued the Commission issued a report and order that I think Karen discussed briefly with you last time, that is basically to clean up some of the old waivers that had been necessary for long periods of time under the Relay Services Program. And we transformed basically some of those waivers into exemptions because the Commission found that the rules need not apply uniformly to all relay services. The third item of interest was a Court of Appeals decision issued by the D.C. Circuit in regards to the Commission's report and order on modifying its rules for the Video Relay Service Program. And the Commission had revised those rules considerably to make the program more effective, and the Court of Appeals upheld the new rate plan for that program, but did send back the new rules on speed of answer for video relay service for additional work, and that's what we're working on now. Finally, earlier this month, the Commission issued its second biennial report under the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. Report is required every 2 years under that act to assess compliance and progress in meeting the Act's requirements. The Commission found there has been an increase in the availability of telecommunications equipment, varying degrees of functionality and features, and offering it at different price points that are accessible to individuals with disabilities. This act in particular addresses accessibility of advanced communication services, including voice over internet, email, text messaging, and video conferencing. And the report found that industry has made efforts to ensure that these services and equipment are accessible, that internet browsers built into mobile phones are accessible, but nevertheless found that some accessibility gaps still exist, and more can be done to include people with disabilities early on in the design and development of advanced communications products and services. And also that more can be done to ensure the availability of information about accessible products and services. And that was, I guess in a nutshell, the gist of the report. We are also just continuing work on a number of ongoing rulemaking proceedings in the accessibility area and also in relay services. Thank you.
It's a quick report, and we appreciate your coming down and rearranging your time.
No problem.
So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. We now have actually a recommendation report from our disability working group. Paul, are you going to kick this off?
Yep. And as Bob is leaving the room, I'll just make sure he thanks his staff for an excellent biennial report. I do hope people take a look at it. Great work. Glad I caught you before you left. So the Disability Work Group has looked at the Lifeline issue along with some other topics, but of recent in the last couple of weeks. We've had a meeting on the topic. We've drafted a resolution and re-looked at that resolution again today to bring forward to the CAC. I want to just point out a couple things. First of all, I believe everyone on the CAC did receive an email version of this, and as well, I think Scott has been kind enough to get some copies printed out.
Paul, we
yeah.
don't have the printed copies yet.
Oh, okay.
Problem in
Paul-
printing that document, we're trying to cut and paste it into another document.
So, Paul, should we pull up the one from over the weekend? Would that be at least helpful for us to look at that one?
Sure, it might be, for those of you who need such things.
Well, I think we need something at least to
The author knows what
Do we? That's true. Do
give
we?
us something.
Do we have a screen to put that on then, or?
Probably not. Do we? No.
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 But we have one. We have something. If you can pull it up. Most of us have some sort of device that Paul sent us on Saturday.
Let me walk through the clauses, and maybe if it triggers any questions or concerns, we can certainly take those up. The first two are actually drawn from a resolution that I think Universal Service has brought to this committee already. So one just states the Lifeline program's intent. A second one states the programs that largely make someone eligible for federal Lifeline assistance, and there are a number of programs listed. The third clause notes that individuals with disabilities experience high unemployment and underemployment, and of course are users or consumers of many of the programs listed. So are certainly, the point is, are a target group of the program. The next clause notes that the Commission has responsibility for implementing legislative requirements around accessibility, and mentions the only specific one mentioned here, I will say, and it's for a particular reason, is the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program that was part of the Communications and Video Accessibility Act. The next clause notes that the report and order that was issued to reform the Lifeline program. Sorry, I've lost my place here. Sorry, the next clause actually is a reminder that there are existing responsibilities on any federal program, any federally assisted program, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act. Point being that even if the FCC weren't implementing legislation, there are still federal funds involved. The next one notes the report and order on Lifeline and LinkUp modernization adopted January 31st, 2012, did not include specific references regarding access to services or information for people with disabilities. We then have two clauses tied to the biennial report to Congress that the Disability Rights Office through CGB just recently issued that Bob mentioned. One noting that concerns were expressed by consumers about the lack of devices that they could use with the Lifeline program that were accessible and met their needs. The second one noting that the Disability Rights Office was generally able to solve those problems when they became aware of them by working directly with companies to identify solutions. The next one notes that there's a specific groups of individuals with disabilities, people who are deaf-blind, hard of hearing, or whose disabilities affect speech, that may be more likely to rely on text messaging rather than voice service. So those are the clauses that sort of describe the challenges that we wanted to make sure we addressed in looking at this topic. And then there are two action clauses that were drafted for this resolution. One called upon the CGB, and there was a friendly amendment offered today in our group to change that to the Federal Communications Commission. So instead of calling upon the CGB to take this action, we called upon the Federal Communications Commission, and we've accepted that amendment. To develop a plan and to report 6 months later, or 6 months from the adoption of this to the next CAC, to work with both USAC and Lifeline providers to ensure that they address both availability of accessible devices as well as accessible information, as there is a number of information handouts, distributions, eligibility determinations, etc., that are tied to this program. And so both the devices and that would allow someone to take use of the program, as well as the information that would be tied to the use of the program, have to be accessibility considerations should be brought to bear. And then the second resolved encourages the Commission to work with carriers and individuals with disabilities who rely on text message communications to develop or to ensure that there is a reasonable level of text message communication available, and also to ensure that those individuals do not lose eligibility just because they do not make a voice call during the period of time that is reviewed. That was a topic that was brought to our attention. So that is the summary of the topics that the disability group has considered. The work group does support this resolution. I would note that there were 4 abstaining votes to abstain. But I would also note that we had very good participation in the discussion from those members who determined that they were not able to, or at this point able to, support the recommendation. So that's the resolution, and as I would note,
You just got copies.
thanks,
so
the print
passing
copies
them
are
around.
available. The only change that we adopted today was to support a substitute Federal Communications Commission for the term Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau in the first resolved clause.
That's the only change?
That's the only change.
In the first, okay, so that, instead of CGB, it's the FCC. as that's coming around. If you don't have it on a screen in front of you, you'll see that on the hard copy.
So the Disability Work Group moves that resolution to the CAC for action.
So Paul has moved that. Do I hear a second? Mitzi has seconded the recommendation. Let's just give it a minute or so, or maybe we can start with discussion. Krista?
Thank you, Paul. I just wanted to let you know we very much appreciate you and the entire committee's consideration of our edits to the recommendation that we gave you on Friday. We think accessibility and the availability of wireless for low-income consumers are priorities for not only CTIA but all of our members, and we appreciate the motivation behind the resolution, but unfortunately, as you had noted, we're going to have to abstain because we didn't have enough time to vet this recommendation by all our members, but we look very forward to working with you and the committee and the FCC to continue to ensure that this essential service is accessible to all consumers.
Thank you, Krista. I think the copies may have stopped at you.
This is Paul. We were happy to accept the recommended edit, and frankly to note that where called upon to do so, carriers have been very responsive in trying to resolve the issues, often going above and beyond what the restrictions they might impose to make sure that people with disabilities had equipment they could use, which we appreciate.
Any other comments, discussion? It's still coming around. I don't know if people need a minute to look at it, Paul.
I don't need it. Thanks. I've already got it.
Anybody else need, people have comments, or do anybody want more time to look at this? Just let me know. Okay. Stephanie?
Thanks. I just wanted to add that NCTA as well will have to abstain because we didn't have time to fully vet this item, but we do think it's important issues, and we look forward to collaborating and helping in the future on this issue.
Fernando?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Paul, I think this is very important, and you know that both I personally and Time Warner Cable support work that the working committee is doing on accessibility. My only concern is I don't believe that we offer the services that you're talking about, and so I'm a little bit concerned about voting on it for that reason, and so I do plan to abstain, but it's not because we don't support the spirit of the recommendation.
Ken?
I ditto everyone else. We just did not have enough time to vet this, so I'll have to abstain today.
Okay. Mitzi?
I have a question, and I was, for other reasons on the call, I believe that Paul had an expert, which was very helpful to discuss the Lifeline program. The question I have is on the very end, the last paragraph on the Be It Resolved. So one is we're very surprised that Lifeline service discusses voice service, and it doesn't really talk about text, which for a lot of people, that is the communication that they will use on the device. So the question I have on the last paragraph is it the intent of the committee that you want to just have the commission work with carriers, or do you actually want the commission itself to take a look at these programs like Lifeline and ensure that when they make services available, that the equivalent of that service that would most likely be used with people with disabilities is included in the program?
So this is Paul, and I'll certainly invite any of my colleague organizations to join, especially those who have more knowledge about the use of text as a primary communications medium. I think we recognize that there are lots of discussions and efforts going forward to try to reform Lifeline, to try to modernize further Lifeline. I think the intent here was simply, for now, to say that there are a group of people for whom voice communications is not really the relevant or in most cases even valuable, or of minor value. And so the point was to try to address that. And the other point was to try to address the one concern we had heard specific to voice, which is individuals who didn't happen to use a voice call might be one of the reasons why eligibility would be lost if you didn't actually make a voice call during the period, but you have a service that allows you to do text. So I think we weren't really trying to, we would certainly add our interest to any discussions around modernizing the program and ensuring that there's a variety of services available to low-income individuals, but I think the intent here was simply to make sure there was flexibility in a program that is still, as I understand it, targeted to voice communications primarily.
Does anyone else have any other comments, questions? Ready to call the question here. So all those who are in favor of the recommendation signify by saying aye and raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Could you do a little higher? So I think I need to do a count on this one. And keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, you can put them down. All those who are opposed, please signify by saying no and raising your hand. All those who abstain, please signify by raising your hand and hold them. Okay, because I have to write down not only the count but the names. T-Mobile, Louisa. After I say you can put your hand down. Ken Mallory, Nasuka. Stephanie, NCTA. Krista, CTIA. Donna, Verizon. Julie, CEA. Ann, NAB. Robert, Qualcomm. Stephen, ECI. And Fernando. Perfect. Okay. So the count is 13 for, 10 abstentions. So the recommendation does carry. Thank you, Paul, very much, and for the Disability Working Group for all your work. I think many of you voted abstained because you didn't have adequate time for review. So we know that that it was maybe perhaps not substance, but just timing. So thank you, Paul, again for the work that you and your working group did. Okay, so we are running about 15 minutes over our time. We have 2 activities that we are going to engage in now, as I mentioned earlier. About 8 of you, I believe, or maybe more now, if if you so desire, would like to do the beta testing of the website, which is in 12 TW 402, correct?
Right down the hall here.
Right down the hall.
Yep, to my right.
And there is only one room to do that in. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's 2 computers in there.
Two
One of
computers.
which, let me get on a microphone here.
Here, Scott.
Okay, 2 computers, one of which has JAWS equipped in that room, and that's where we need to go.
Okay.
But we're going to split up, are we not?
We're going to split up. And the other activity is going to the tech room that they have here at the FCC to see some of the.
Does anybody want to do that? Let's find that out.
And so, how many would like to go to the show and tell that the FCC has? People can, split off. So, we can only take 2 at a time doing the beta testing. But she said it would be about 10 minutes per person. Who did that previous? Robert did, and who was the other? Oh, and Irene. Did it take about 10 minutes? Yeah. Just about 10 minutes. So 2 at a time, 10 minutes, trade off. I'd like to get back here.
And so it means one person to use the special
JAWS one?
JAWS one, and one for the other.
Correct.
So
2 at a time.
Yeah.
2 at a time. Do you have to trade off? Do you have to each use? No.
No,
One
you
on
need-
each one.
Right.
Okay. So 2
if you
people at a
need
time.
the JAWS, use it. If you don't, go for the
Why
other.
would you need the JAWS?
Accessibility.
Is that one accessible?
Yes.
Okay, so I know that Claude is interested in going, Paul is interested in going, and Ryan is interested in going. So obviously, the 3 of you should, 2 of you should not go at the same time.
The JAWS is accessible for people.
It really only affects me, I think.
And potentially Paul, but not Claude. It's
Only for sight.
Yeah.
Impaired.
It's
Okay.
just me.
Okay.
It's reserved for Paul.
For Paul. So Paul, you should not go at the same time as yourself.
Yeah, let's make sure I don't do that.
Okay. All right, everybody go to your places. I want to be back here if we could exactly at 3 o'clock. We'll adjourn about 10 minutes after 3 today. I know we're supposed to do 3, but we need about 10 minutes more of your time. And that's it, right? Oh, we need probably about 15 minutes of your time. Uh-oh, I lied. 15 minutes of your time. We will adjourn at 15 minutes. We have prizes. Okay.
That's one of the good reasons to stay.
There we go. Welcome back, everybody. We have just a couple of items of business. First of all, Mitzi, here is your certificate. We'll get that down to you. Anyone want to meet me halfway? Did everybody in the room? Hold up. Did everybody in the room get your thank you of certificate of appreciation? Okay, excellent. Sorry, our afternoon gave you an opportunity perhaps for a little more chill time than we anticipated, but
More so than usual.
Yes, Ryan.
Go ahead. Just thinking in terms of the certificate, since I'm just here as an alternate for Dorothy, am I supposed to pick that up for her?
Yes.
Well, he doesn't have to. We could actually, it could be mailed to her if that's easier. Are they together?
I can bring it for her.
Okay, perfect. We'll get that to you then. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
So we have an item of business. You know that we have a time for comments from the public. We did have that scheduled this at the end of the afternoon. So we do want to make that time available. I don't see anyone unknown in our room here, however, except, let me look behind me. Nope. But I will just make an announcement that time is available now. If there is anyone in the room, you can step up to the table and grab a mic if you want to do that. If not, I did want to just get everybody back in the room to thank everyone for your participation in the CAC over the past 2 years. You've heard from Scott about the rechartering, the opportunity to apply to be on the CAC again. And also, we did have on our schedule, if you had any comments for the next CAC, and I think that would be right now. I don't want this to be really a substantive discussion about policy issues, but rather anything you want, any advice you want to give to Scott about the process going forward in the next couple of minutes that we have, anything that you want to send message-wise to Scott, his team, and or up the chain at the FCC to think about. Now is the time. Mitzi, why am I not surprised?
I should have given the note to Andrew. Just one is, I really wanted to just thank the staff and to also particularly thank our interpreters. They are here. They really enable us to communicate with each other. So I wanted to just definitely make. Second was just on the, and this came up, there are some times where we have discussions, particularly when the commissioners come, and I think it's very valuable, and I have actually sent out links when the video becomes accessible. And one of the things that would be helpful if there was a way for the commission to put time indexes, so even to the agenda, so that you could say this portion of the agenda begins at 2 hours and 50 minutes, this portion of the agenda begins at 4 hours, just so that it would make it easier for people who actually wanted to find the discussion of those. It should also be that the PowerPoint presentations that are given during the meetings, it would be very helpful if those links were automatically included within the CVA, within the CAC page. And then the last thing I would just say is that just for the new CAC, it's been an honor to serve. But one of the things I've looked at is that we have, I think, put a lot of work into these recommendations. So it would be very useful to me, I think, for the next CAC that the commission actually give a status report on, what the progress is on those initiatives. And I think it's fair if the commission says in some of these recommendations, these are beyond the scope of the resources that we have or what we can plan to do, but I think it's better to have an honest conversation about what the commission is actually working on and what the commission is not, rather than creating an expectation that everything coming out of here is something that's going to be looked at. So, and I think that's fair, but having that update, I think, would be useful.
Thank you, Mitzi. And those are great suggestions. I particularly like your suggestion to break down the video so that the broadcast, so that you can easily search to sections that you want to see. Otherwise, it's a bit overwhelming to sit there and look through the whole day. And I would just like to say that we've mentioned this a couple times today, but I think this has been a very productive CAC, and I think we've really captured the attention of the Commission on a number of issues that they really have taken to action. So we have said over and over and over again, do something about the website. We've said over and over again, do something about consumer complaints, and they have really acted on issues that the CAC has been concerned about for a number of years. So recommendations or not, they have been a part of recommendations. They've also been a part of what we have said around this table, and the FCC has been taking action. So I think the CAC should feel really good about the work that you all have been doing. So, give yourself a pat on the back for all the work that you've been doing. Anything else? But good ideas, Mitzi. Thank you. Anything else from the group around the table? Participation has been great. Really appreciate that. And Scott, Scott, I can't say enough about all you do for the CAC. No, we have to have time for Scott. I am sorry that there is not a person in every chair to hear that, but they all know, and they've heard me say it before.
Well, thank you.
You are a shining star at the FCC, at the CGB, and your bosses know I've said it to them directly. So
Well, thank you very much. And,
we couldn't do this without you.
It's been a great group. Well, thank you.
Is it possible for us to send some, before we end, some written note to
That's a
the
lovely
chair
idea.
for Scott's work? And I will say that I have colleagues who serve on other commissions, and they are very jealous of the amount of time that the commissioners spend on this committee, and it vastly outshines participation in other communities. And I think it's got to be, in large part, a reflection both on the work that this group does and the staff, Scott in particular.
And now that we're talking about each other as we are, we've also had a very, very involved chairperson that I've had the pleasure of working with who never says no when I call and say, you know, the Admiral wants to talk to you on Friday afternoon about a possible presentation for Monday, or will you help me figure out who we should invite, you know, on Thursday for a Monday meeting. So I appreciate all that she does as well, and let's give her a hand, shall we? All right, that'd be great. Thank you.
Claude, but I won't forget that suggestion, Mitzi. I think that's a lovely idea to do a letter to
I guess Chris and the chairman?
To Chris?
Chris and
CC it to
CC
the chairman?
Yeah, the chairman.
I think that's a lovely idea. I hear consensus there that we should definitely do something like that. I love that idea. I think we've got him.
I'd also thank Betty, who these days wouldn't work out nearly as well
And
logistically
Betty,
as it worked for Betty.
thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Betty. Thank you for all you do, too. Did I see a hand? Claude?
Yes, I'd also like us to give a hand to Deborah for taking the lead on the committee. That is no small feat to be the chair, and we all know that, so I think that we also would like to applaud your efforts, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you, Claude. I appreciate it. I have no other business. Does anyone around the table have any other business? So is there a motion to adjourn? And all those in favor? All right. Thank you all.
Hope to see you soon, everybody.
Yeah.
See that John gets that?